Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey through the hidden corners of the wizarding world. Tonight, we leave behind the grand halls of Hogwarts and the legends written in chocolate frog cards, and instead follow the life of a man history rarely stopped to understand. Aberforth Dumbledore was remembered by many only as the rough keeper of a small inn in Hogsmeade, standing beneath dusty beams with goats somewhere nearby. But behind that weathered face lived a story shaped by grief, loyalty, anger, and sacrifice. So settle comfortably now, and let us travel back through the long and difficult life of the last Dumbledore brother. In the early 1880s, long before the wizarding world would speak the name Dumbledore with awe or suspicion, another child was born into the quiet household at Mold on the Wold. His name was Aberforth Dumbledore, younger brother to Albus, second son of Percival and Kendra Dumbledore. And from the very beginning, he seemed cut from entirely different cloth than the brother history would immortalize. The village itself rested among rolling green hills, where narrow stone roads curved between cottages that had stood for centuries. Smoke drifted lazily from crooked chimneys in the evenings, carrying the scent of burning peat and cooked stew into the cool country air. Gardens flourished beside every home, magical and ordinary plants growing side by side in peaceful coexistence. Purple foxglove leaned against silverleaf shrubs. Moon lilies opened after sunset, their pale petals glowing softly beneath the stars. Somewhere beyond the village center, a stream wound through meadows filled with long grass that whispered when the wind passed over it. The Dumbledore house stood near the edge of the village where the fields began. It was not grand, but warm. Its wooden floors creaked gently with age, and its windows overlooked hills dotted with sheep and wandering magical creatures that occasionally strayed too close to the garden fence. Inside, the home carried the constant hum of quiet magic. Teacups stirred themselves. Blankets folded neatly in the air. Books drifted back to shelves after use. Percival Dumbledore filled the house with steady warmth and easy laughter. He worked for the Ministry of Magic in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, and though his work often involved chaos and confusion, he carried little of that tension home with him. He enjoyed simple pleasures, long walks through the countryside, warm fires after rainstorms, sherbet lemons tucked into coat pockets. He believed magic should make life gentler, not grander. Kendra Dumbledore was quieter than her husband, but no less formidable. She possessed a careful sort of strength, the kind built from discipline rather than charm. Her magic was precise and controlled. Floors gleamed beneath her wand. Curtains stitched themselves closed beneath elegant charms. She rarely raised her voice, yet the household moved around her with natural order. By the time Aberforth was old enough to understand the rhythms of family life, his older brother Albus had already begun astonishing adults around him. Albus was brilliant from childhood. Everyone noticed it: teachers, neighbors, visiting relatives. Questions poured from him endlessly. He read books far beyond his age. He watched magic not simply with wonder, but with analysis. Even as a small boy, he wanted to know why spells worked, how magical laws connected together, and what possibilities existed beyond current understanding. Aberforth did not care for such things. Where Albus lingered over books, Aberforth wandered fields and streams. Where Albus practiced wand movements with perfect concentration, Aberforth climbed trees, explored hillsides, and returned home muddy from chasing creatures through tall grass. He preferred living things to theories. He trusted instinct more than intellect. The differences between the brothers became clear almost immediately. Albus spoke carefully, already sounding older than his years. Aberforth spoke bluntly and honestly, sometimes too honestly. Albus enjoyed praise from adults. Aberforth grew uncomfortable whenever too much attention settled on him. Albus naturally took command during games with other children. Aberforth resisted being directed, even by his brother. And yet, despite these differences, there remained affection between them in those early years. On warm summer evenings, the brothers sometimes sat beside the stream behind their house while dragonflies skimmed the water. Albus would practice small bits of accidental magic, turning pebbles briefly into tiny silver birds or making fish leap unnaturally high from the water. Aberforth watched with mild interest before eventually losing patience and trying to catch the fish by hand instead. "You miss the elegance of it," Albus once complained after Aberforth splashed directly into the stream. "You miss the point of fish," Aberforth replied, the point being to catch them. Even then, their minds moved in different directions. The arrival of Ariana Dumbledore transformed the household entirely. She was born several years after Aberforth, and from the moment she entered the world, both brothers became fascinated with her. Ariana possessed a strange gentleness even as an infant. Her laughter came easily. Her large eyes followed magical lights with quiet amazement. But alongside that softness came immense magical power, stronger and less stable than either of her brothers had displayed at her age. Flowers bloomed when she giggled. Glass trembled when she cried. Once, during a thunderstorm, sparks burst from her tiny hands and drifted harmlessly across the ceiling like wandering stars. Albus approached Ariana with wonder. Aberforth approached her with protectiveness. He disliked loud arguments near her cradle. He chased away older village boys who teased her for strange magical accidents. When she toddled through the garden, he followed nearby to make sure she did not wander too close to steep hills or the stream. Unlike Albus, who admired Ariana's magic itself, Aberforth cared only that she smiled. As the years passed, the younger brother became increasingly more comfortable among creatures than people. He fed stray Neasels behind the house and rescued injured birds with awkward gentleness. He learned how to calm nervous animals through patience rather than spells. Even difficult creatures responded to him unusually well. One autumn afternoon, Percival found his son sitting quietly beside a wounded goat that had broken through a neighboring fence. "You know," Percival said carefully, "most boys your age would have asked for help." Aberforth shrugged. It looked frightened. The goat rested calmly against him while he spoke. That simple instinct would remain with him for the rest of his life. Unlike Albus, who increasingly impressed adults with brilliance and ambition, Aberforth gained little admiration from visitors. Teachers described him as capable but unremarkable. Neighbors found him stubborn. Some relatives quietly compared him unfavorably to his older brother, though never within earshot of Kendra. But Aberforth noticed. Children always notice. At family gatherings, questions flowed toward Albus first. Adults asked what he was reading, what spells he had mastered, what future he imagined for himself. Meanwhile, Aberforth sat quietly beside the fireplace, or slipped outside to avoid conversation altogether. Yet if this imbalance wounded him, he rarely showed it openly. He simply stopped seeking approval. There were moments, though, when the contrast between the brothers became impossible to ignore. During one village celebration, several magical families gathered in a meadow beyond the church. Lanterns floated overhead, while enchanted instruments played music beneath the evening sky. Children ran laughing between tables, while adults shared stories beside fires. Albus spent much of the evening speaking with older wizards about magical history and advanced charms. Even at a young age, he carried himself with startling confidence. Aberforth disappeared, halfway through the gathering. Kendra eventually found him sitting behind a nearby stone wall with 3 goats that had escaped their pen. "What are you doing out here?" she asked gently, keeping them calm. The goats indeed seemed calmer beside him. One rested its head against his shoulder, while another nibbled lazily at grass near his boots. Kendra studied her son carefully in the fading light. "You know," she said after a moment, "there are different kinds of cleverness." Aberforth looked unconvinced. "Albus is the one everyone notices." "Yes," Kendra admitted softly, "but that does not mean he sees everything." Those words stayed with him long after childhood faded. The peaceful years at Mold on the Wold moved slowly, marked by ordinary rhythms that later seemed impossibly distant. Rain tapping softly against windows during autumn evenings, smoke curling from chimneys during winter mornings, Ariana laughing while chasing floating lights through the garden during spring. For a brief time, the Dumbledore family still resembled countless other magical families scattered across Britain, before fear entered the house, before shame settled over their name, before responsibility hardened children into adults far too quickly. Aberforth remembered those years later, not as perfect, but as warm. He remembered his father's laughter echoing through the kitchen, his mother humming quietly while folding laundry through magic, Albus reading beside windows streaked with rain, Ariana asleep beneath blankets while candlelight flickered softly across her face, and perhaps most painfully of all, he remembered how ordinary everything once felt. The wizarding world would eventually remember Albus Dumbledore as a legend, great wizard, headmaster, victor over dark lords. But in those early years, at Mold on the Wold, before history reached into their home and shattered it apart, Aberforth knew his brother simply as a boy, sitting beside a stream beneath the evening sky, arguing about fish, while summer wind moved gently through the hills. In the quiet years before grief settled permanently over the Dumbledore name, the village of Mold on the Wold existed in a kind of peaceful isolation from the wider wizarding world. Hidden among rolling hills and narrow country roads, it was the sort of place where magic blended so naturally into daily life that few paused to notice it. Lanterns lit themselves at dusk. Garden fences repaired their own broken boards overnight. The windmills on distant hills turned without touching breeze, whenever local witches enchanted them after storms. To young Aberforth Dumbledore, it simply felt like home. The Dumbledore cottage stood near the outskirts of the village, where green fields stretched toward distant woods. Ivy climbed the stone walls in uneven patterns, and smoke drifted from the chimney most evenings, with the comforting smell of burning wood and cooked bread. A crooked apple tree leaned beside the front gate, its branches low enough for children to climb. The house itself was rarely quiet. Percival Dumbledore possessed the sort of warm voice that naturally filled rooms, and laughter often followed him through the house after returning from work at the Ministry of Magic. He enjoyed telling stories at dinner, some amusing, some dramatic, most slightly embellished for the entertainment of his children. Kendra Dumbledore balanced his warmth with steadiness. She moved through the household with calm precision, maintaining order through both discipline and subtle magic. Together, they created a home that felt safe, at least for a while. Aberforth entered this world already living beneath the shadow of his older brother's unusual brilliance. Albus Dumbledore seemed born with magic woven directly into his thoughts. Adults spoke of him in lowered voices filled with admiration. He learned quickly, read constantly, and asked questions so advanced that even grown wizards occasionally struggled to answer them. Aberforth admired his brother in the way younger siblings often do, though that admiration carried confusion alongside affection. Albus enjoyed sitting quietly for hours beside windows with books spread across his lap, while sunlight moved slowly across the floorboards. He memorized magical theories for pleasure. He practiced wand movements repeatedly until every gesture became elegant and exact. Aberforth could not imagine anything more exhausting. He preferred movement, open air, muddy boots and cold streams and climbing stone walls despite his mother's warnings. He learned magic differently, through instinct and repetition rather than study. When something worked, he remembered the feeling of it rather than the theory behind it. The contrast between the brothers became clearer each year. When village children gathered for games in nearby meadows, Albus organized elaborate magical contests with complicated rules and invented scoring systems. Aberforth ignored half the instructions and focused entirely on winning. When older witches visited the house, Albus charmed them with polite conversation and thoughtful observations. Aberforth slipped outside before anyone could ask him questions about schoolwork or future ambitions. Yet despite these differences, the brothers shared moments of genuine closeness during childhood. On long summer evenings, they wandered the hills behind their home together, while twilight settled softly over the countryside. Sometimes, Albus practiced small bits of magic, while Aberforth searched for strange creatures hidden among tall grass and rocks. They once spent nearly an entire afternoon attempting to coax a stubborn Kneazle from beneath a collapsed stone wall. Albus tried clever spells. Aberforth eventually succeeded by offering it leftover chicken from his pocket. "You know," Albus said afterward with mild annoyance, "there are more sophisticated methods." "It came out, didn't it? That isn't the point. It usually is." Their conversations often ended this way: Albus searching for complexity, Aberforth reducing things to simple truths. When Ariana was born, the entire rhythm of the household changed. From the beginning, she carried unusual magic inside her. Even as an infant, strange things happened around her without warning. Candles flared brighter when she laughed. Toys floated above her cradle. Once, during a rainstorm, tiny glowing lights drifted from her fingertips while she slept peacefully in Kendra's arms. Albus watched these displays with fascination. Aberforth watched Ariana herself. That difference mattered more than either brother yet understood. As Ariana grew older, Aberforth became fiercely protective of her. She followed him constantly through the garden and fields, her small footsteps hurrying to keep pace beside him. He taught her how to identify safe berries from poisonous ones, how to approach frightened animals slowly, and how to whistle through blades of grass beside the stream. Ariana adored both brothers, but differently. Albus filled her imagination with wonder. He conjured floating lights above her bed at night and transformed pebbles into hopping silver rabbits that made her laugh until tears filled her eyes. Aberforth made her feel safe. If village children mocked her accidental magic, Aberforth stepped between them before Albus even noticed. If thunderstorms frightened her, she sat beside him silently until the thunder passed. If she cried after one of her uncontrolled magical bursts shattered dishes or cracked windows, Aberforth never looked frightened the way others sometimes did. He simply cleaned up beside her without complaint. Years later, after war and death and bitterness had transformed the Dumbledore family into something broken and haunted, Aberforth would still remember those afternoons with painful clarity. Ariana laughing beside the stream, Ariana asleep against his shoulder while evening wind moved through the hills. Ariana before fear entered her life and changed everything. During these early years, Mold on the Wold remained a place of small routines and quiet familiarity. The villagers knew one another well. Owls crossed the skies each morning, carrying letters and newspapers between cottages. Elderly witches gossiped outside the bakery, while children chased enchanted hoops along cobbled roads. Magical accidents were minor and usually amusing, teapots exploding, garden gnomes multiplying unexpectedly, one unfortunate wizard accidentally turning his own hair bright blue for nearly 3 weeks. Life moved slowly there, and in many ways, Aberforth belonged to that simpler world far more naturally than Albus ever did. Albus dreamed constantly of Hogwarts, long before his acceptance letter arrived. He read every book he could find about the school. He memorized famous headmasters and studied magical achievements of previous centuries with restless ambition already beginning to emerge inside him. Aberforth cared far less. He looked forward to learning magic properly, certainly, but not because of glory or recognition. He wanted competence, practicality, enough skill to move comfortably through the world without depending on others. Even as a child, he distrusted greatness, not openly, not consciously, but whenever adults praised Albus too intensely, Aberforth noticed something unsettling in the room afterward, a distance forming between his brother and everyone around him, admiration slowly turning Albus into something less ordinary and less reachable. One winter evening, after several ministry officials visited for dinner, Aberforth overheard one of them speaking quietly to Percival near the fireplace. "That boy of yours is exceptional," the wizard said. "There's something extraordinary waiting for him." Percival smiled proudly. Aberforth, sitting silently halfway up the staircase, remembered disliking the sentence without fully understanding why. Extraordinary things, he would later learn, often came with terrible costs. Kendra treated her children carefully, but differently. With Albus, she encouraged discipline and study. She recognized his intellect early and pushed him toward careful control of his abilities. With Aberforth, her lessons focused less on achievement and more on character. She taught him practical household charms, healing spells for cuts and burns, how to calm frightened creatures without magic, how to recognize dangerous silence in people before anger surfaced. "Magic is easy," she once told him, while repairing torn curtains through delicate wandwork. "Understanding people is harder." Aberforth absorbed these lessons more deeply than anyone realized. Unlike Albus, who often analyzed emotions from a distance, Aberforth felt them immediately and intensely. He recognized tension before arguments began. He sensed exhaustion in his mother long before she admitted it. He noticed the way his father occasionally fell silent after receiving certain ministry letters. He understood moods instinctively, and because of that, he increasingly found comfort among animals instead of people. Animals did not pretend. A frightened creature behaved frightened. An angry creature behaved angry. There were no hidden motives, no polished lies beneath polite conversation. Aberforth trusted that honesty. By the age of 10, he spent much of his free time caring for injured creatures brought from nearby fields and woods. Birds with damaged wings, stray neasels, foxes caught in wire traps left by muggles beyond the village outskirts, and goats especially. No one entirely understood why he liked them so much, though Percival joked that they matched his stubborn personality. Aberforth himself probably could not have explained it clearly. He simply enjoyed their company, their rough intelligence, their refusal to impress anyone. One spring morning, Kendra found nearly 6 goats wandering the garden after Aberforth secretly brought them home during heavy rainstorms. Aberforth she said slowly, while staring at the destruction spreading across her flower beds. Why are there goats in my kitchen? They were cold. There are 6 of them. They have families. Kendra closed her eyes briefly as one goat began chewing tablecloth beside the fireplace. Yet despite the frustration, even she struggled to stay angry for long. Aberforth possessed an honesty difficult to resent completely. As childhood continued, the gap between the brothers widened naturally. Albus increasingly became someone admired beyond the family itself. Teachers praised him constantly. Visiting relatives spoke about his future with certainty. Even villagers who barely knew the family discussed the boy's remarkable talent. Aberforth, meanwhile, became easy to overlook, and strangely, he preferred it that way. Attention embarrassed him. Praise made him suspicious. Whenever adults compared him unfavorably to Albus, he shrugged rather than argued. But deep beneath that indifference, resentment slowly began forming. Not hatred, never hatred. Only the quiet exhaustion of always standing beside brilliance without sharing it. Still, during those years before tragedy arrived, affection held the family together, strongly enough that such tensions remained small and manageable. The Dumbledore household still knew warmth then. Evenings often ended with all 3 children gathered near the fireplace while Percival read aloud from magical adventure stories. Ariana curled beneath blankets listening sleepily, while Albus occasionally interrupted to criticize historical inaccuracies. Aberforth usually ignored the story altogether and fed scraps to whichever animal he had secretly smuggled indoors that week. Outside, wind moved softly through hills surrounding mold on the wold. Inside, candlelight flickered gently against stone walls, while the future waited silently beyond the windows. The wizarding world would one day remember Aberforth Dumbledore as a bitter old barman standing beneath dusty beams inside the Hogshead Inn. Suspicious, solitary, rough around the edges. But before grief hardened him into that quieter shape, he was simply a boy running through wet grass beneath open skies, carrying injured creatures home beneath his coat, while his younger sister laughed somewhere behind him. The summer that destroyed the Dumbledore family arrived quietly. Years later, Aberforth would struggle to remember the exact day it began. Memory had a strange habit of softening ordinary mornings once tragedy attached itself to them. He remembered sunlight over the hills, bees drifting lazily through the garden, Ariana laughing somewhere near the hedge, while flowers floated around her in slow circles. Nothing about the morning warned of catastrophe. At that time, Ariana was still a child, filled with uncontrolled but beautiful magic. Strange things happened around her constantly. Butterflies formed from flower petals when she laughed too hard. Windows misted silver when she cried. Small objects drifted through the air around her whenever excitement overcame concentration. The family treated these incidents carefully but gently. Albus found them fascinating. He watched Ariana's accidental magic with growing intellectual curiosity, already attempting to understand the mechanisms behind it. Aberforth only worried whether she looked frightened afterward. That afternoon, Kendra remained inside preparing supper, while Percival worked late at the ministry. Albus sat beneath the apple tree, reading one of his advanced magical texts, occasionally glancing toward Ariana in distracted amusement. Aberforth had wandered farther down the hill, searching for an injured Kneazle someone claimed to have seen near the stream. By the time he returned, everything had changed. The attack itself happened quickly. 3 Muggle boys from a nearby settlement had wandered beyond familiar roads while exploring the countryside. They saw Ariana performing magic near the garden hedge, flowers spinning weightlessly around her while sunlight flashed through their petals. At first, they watched in stunned silence. Then came fear. Fear quickly became cruelty. Children often react harshly to what they do not understand, and these boys understood nothing of magic except that it frightened them. They demanded Ariana repeat the trick. When she panicked and failed, they grew rougher. Voices rose, hands grabbed at her shoulders, and Ariana's magic exploded. Not outward in controlled force, but inward and everywhere at once. Something inside her broke that day. Aberforth never learned every detail directly. The family rarely spoke about the attack afterward, not completely. Some memories became too painful to describe aloud. But he remembered the aftermath with unbearable clarity. He remembered sprinting uphill after hearing screams. He remembered shattered branches and flowers blackened by unstable magic. He remembered Ariana lying trembling beside the hedge, while sparks burst uncontrollably around her small body like dying stars. Most of all, he remembered his mother's face. Kendra Dumbledore rarely lost control of her emotions, but terror had hollowed her expression completely as she held Ariana against her chest. The little girl shook violently while wild magic cracked across the garden stones. Albus stood nearby, frozen in horror. Even then, even at such a young age, Aberforth sensed something terrible had happened beyond ordinary injury. Ariana did not simply look frightened. She looked broken. The days afterward passed beneath heavy silence. Ariana stopped laughing. Before the attack, her magic had carried wonder and brightness. Afterward, it became unstable and dangerous. Objects shattered around her without warning. Sudden noises triggered violent magical eruptions. She recoiled from strangers and flinched whenever voices rose too sharply. Sometimes she stared at walls for hours without speaking. Other times, waves of uncontrolled magic burst from her so violently that furniture splintered and windows cracked. No healer seemed able to truly help her. The family's peaceful life began collapsing almost immediately. Percival Dumbledore changed fastest of all. Before the attack, he had been warm and patient, a father whose laughter filled rooms easily. Afterward, something colder entered him. Rage settled beneath his grief with frightening intensity. He found the boys responsible. Exactly what he did to them remained unclear, even within the family itself. Ministry records never fully revealed the details, though whispers later suggested severe magical assault. What mattered was simpler. Percival used magic against muggles. That alone guaranteed destruction. The trial moved swiftly. The ministry cared little for explanations involving magical children and accidental trauma. The statute of secrecy mattered more than private suffering. Percival refused to explain himself fully, because doing so would expose Ariana's condition. So he remained silent, and silence condemned him. Aberforth remembered the morning ministry officials arrived at their home. Rain fell steadily against the windows, while grey light spread across the kitchen floor. Ariana hid upstairs, trembling beneath blankets. Kendra stood rigid beside the doorway as ministry wizards entered with grim expressions. Percival knelt briefly before his sons. "You look after your mother," he told them quietly. Then he looked toward the ceiling where Ariana hid above them. "And your sister." Aberforth did not fully understand Azkaban then. He only understood that his father was leaving and not returning. Albus asked careful questions after the officials departed. Legal questions, procedural questions. He wanted to understand what would happen next. Aberforth simply sat beside the kitchen table, staring at the door long after it closed. The village changed toward them almost overnight. Before Percival's arrest, the Dumbledores had been respected. Afterwards, Whispers followed them through every street in Mold on the Wold. Adults lowered voices whenever Kendra passed. Children repeated distorted rumors overheard from frightened parents. Some claimed Percival hated muggles. Others claimed dark magic had always existed within the family. Nobody knew the truth, and the Dumbledores could never explain it. That silence isolated them more completely each week. Kendra withdrew from village life almost entirely. Curtains remained closed more often. Visitors stopped arriving. Even ordinary errands became difficult beneath the weight of staring eyes and cautious gossip. Meanwhile, Ariana deteriorated steadily. Her magic no longer resembled ordinary accidental bursts from frightened children. It behaved like something trapped and wounded inside her, pressing outward violently whenever emotions overwhelmed her fragile control. One evening during supper, a dropped spoon startled her badly enough that every candle in the house exploded simultaneously. Another time, during a nightmare, magical force shattered half the upstairs windows before sunrise. After each episode, Ariana cried harder from guilt than fear. "I didn't mean to," she whispered constantly afterward. Aberforth became the only person who could calm her reliably. Perhaps because he never treated her like a danger first and a sister second. Kendra tried desperately to contain Ariana's condition through protective charms and constant supervision. Albus researched magical theory obsessively even before attending Hogwarts, searching library books for explanations. But Aberforth simply stayed beside Ariana through the worst moments. When magic shook the walls, he held her hand. When she panicked after breaking objects unintentionally, he cleaned beside her without speaking. When she cried herself exhausted, he sat awake nearby until she finally slept. He was still only a boy himself. Yet childhood had already begun slipping away from him. The final decision to leave Mold on the Wold came after one especially violent magical episode nearly exposed Ariana publicly. A passing witch witnessed strange lights bursting from the Dumbledore windows during the night, and questions spread quickly afterward. Kendra realized the village would never allow them peace again, so they left. The move to Godric's Hollow happened quietly beneath cold autumn skies. Most villagers watched from windows rather than offering farewell. Boxes floated silently into the carriage beneath Kendra's wand, while Albus carefully organized books and belongings. Aberforth helped Ariana into the carriage last. She clung tightly to his sleeve while staring fearfully toward gathered villagers in the distance. The journey itself passed mostly in silence. Rain streaked across carriage windows, while muddy roads carried them farther from the only home Aberforth had ever known. Albus occasionally attempted conversation, but nobody responded for long. Kendra looked exhausted already. Without Percival beside her, every burden now rested entirely on her shoulders. Protect Ariana, hide the truth, raise 3 children alone, survive public shame. Aberforth watched her age within that single journey. Godric's Hollow differed greatly from Mold on the Wold. It was older somehow, heavier with history. Wizarding families and muggles lived side by side there beneath uneasy but practiced peace. Narrow streets curved between ancient homes covered in ivy and moss. The graveyard near the church seemed older than memory itself, its leaning stones worn smooth by centuries of rain. Their new house stood near the edge of the village, apart from most neighbors. Kendra chose it specifically for isolation. Tall hedges surrounded the property. Thick walls muffled sound. Nearby woods created privacy from curious eyes. The place felt less like a home than a hiding place. Inside, life narrowed into routine shaped entirely around Ariana's condition. Windows stayed reinforced with protective charms. Sudden visitors became disasters. Loud noises risked magical outbursts. Every day revolved around avoiding fear, avoiding stress, avoiding anything that might trigger another explosion of unstable power. Albus adapted through study. Aberforth adapted through responsibility. Kendra increasingly relied on him to help watch Ariana during difficult days. He learned how to recognize warning signs before magical episodes erupted completely. Restless pacing, trembling hands, sudden silence. Sometimes he could calm her by simply talking softly beside her. Other times, nothing helped. During the worst episodes, furniture splintered apart while magical force screamed invisibly through rooms. Kendra fought desperately to contain the destruction through shields and calming charms, while Albus attempted theoretical solutions no child should have needed to consider. Aberforth mostly focused on survival. Protect Ariana from hurting herself. Protect everyone else from Ariana's magic. And somehow preserve enough gentleness that she still remembered she was loved. The emotional divide between the brothers deepened quietly during these years. Albus increasingly approached Ariana's condition intellectually. He researched obscure magical theory and attempted to understand what she had become. He meant well. He truly did. But Aberforth began resenting the distance hidden inside that brilliance. To Albus, Ariana slowly became a problem needing answers. To Aberforth, she remained simply Ariana. One winter evening, after another violent magical episode left scorch marks across the kitchen walls, Albus sat reading through heavy magical texts beside the fire. "There has to be some explanation," he muttered. Aberforth looked at him sharply. "She's not a puzzle." Albus blinked in surprise. "I didn't say she was. You think it." The silence afterward stretched painfully long. Neither brother forgot it. As months turned into years, Aberforth increasingly understood something that Albus perhaps never fully accepted. The world outside their house no longer mattered very much. Everything revolved around Ariana now. Schooling, meals, sleep, safety. Every ordinary part of life bent around her unstable magic, like trees growing around buried stone. And despite the exhaustion, despite fear and frustration and grief, Aberforth never truly blamed her. He blamed the boys who attacked her. He blamed the ministry that imprisoned Percival. He blamed the villagers whose whispers forced them into hiding. Sometimes, quietly and unfairly, he blamed Albus too. Not for Ariana's suffering itself, but for never quite understanding it emotionally the way he did. Albus still dreamed of greatness, even beneath tragedy. Hogwarts waited ahead for him, like a door opening toward destiny. Aberforth looked at their family and saw only survival. That difference would shape the rest of both their lives. By the time winter settled fully over Godric's Hollow, childhood had vanished from the Dumbledore household almost entirely. The warm cottage at Mould on the Wold already felt impossibly distant. Percival remained locked inside Azkaban. Kendra moved through each day with growing exhaustion, hidden beneath forced calm. Ariana lived trapped between fear and unstable magic she could neither understand nor control. And Aberforth, still far too young for such burdens, learned the lesson that would define him long before adulthood arrived. Love was not glorious. Love was staying beside broken people after everyone else stepped back in fear. The day Albus Dumbledore left for Hogwarts, the sky above Godric's Hollow hung low with grey clouds and cold, drifting rain. Mist rolled across the hills beyond the village, while damp wind rattled loose branches against the windows of the Dumbledore house. Inside, Kendra moved through the kitchen with careful efficiency, preparing breakfast while simultaneously watching Ariana from the corner of her eye. The little girl sat quietly near the fire, turning a cracked teacup slowly between trembling fingers. Every few moments, faint sparks escaped from the porcelain. Albus stood near the doorway beside his trunk, trying very hard to appear calm and mature, despite the excitement flickering beneath his expression. He had waited for this day for years. Hogwarts represented everything he loved: knowledge, possibility, freedom. Aberforth watched him silently from the table. At first, he told himself he felt happy for his brother, and part of him truly did. Albus belonged at Hogwarts in a way few people belonged anywhere. Even before attending, he already seemed connected to the wider magical world through sheer brilliance alone. Teachers would admire him. Professors would challenge him. Doors would open around him naturally. But another part of Aberforth felt something colder and harder to name, because Albus was leaving and everyone else was staying. The goodbye itself remained awkwardly restrained. Kendra hugged Albus tightly near the doorway, while Ariana clung nervously to his sleeve. "You'll come home for Christmas?" she asked softly. "Of course," Albus promised. Then he glanced toward Aberforth. "Look after them while I'm gone." The words were meant kindly, yet Aberforth disliked hearing them immediately, as though responsibility already belonged to him by default. The moment Albus departed, the house changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but subtly, like warmth leaving a room after a fire dies low. For the first time, Aberforth realized how much space his older brother naturally occupied, even in silence. Without Albus filling corners of the house with books and theories and restless conversation, the home felt quieter, smaller, more tired. Life settled into difficult routine almost immediately. Mornings began cautiously, depending entirely on Ariana's mood. Some days she woke calm and gentle, wandering softly through the kitchen while Kendra prepared breakfast. Other mornings, she awoke screaming from nightmares no one could fully understand. During those episodes, unstable magic burst violently around her before sunrise. Windows cracked, furniture overturned, plates exploded from shelves. Kendra handled these incidents with increasing exhaustion, hidden beneath forced calm. Aberforth helped however he could. At first, his tasks seemed small enough. Watching Ariana while Kendra visited the village, cleaning damage after magical outbursts, carrying groceries, feeding animals. But slowly those responsibilities multiplied. He learned how to repair shattered furniture with basic spells before fully understanding the theory behind them. He learned calming charms meant for frightened creatures, because they occasionally soothed Ariana during episodes. He learned how to recognize the signs of magical instability before explosions came. Most importantly, he learned how to stay calm himself. Fear only made things worse. Meanwhile, letters from Hogwarts began arriving regularly. Albus wrote constantly. His first letters overflowed with amazement. Descriptions of the castle, the enchanted ceiling in the Great Hall, staircases that shifted unpredictably, professors who treated magic like art and science combined together. Kendra read these letters carefully beside the fire each evening. Ariana smiled faintly whenever Albus described magical creatures. Aberforth listened in silence. The letters changed gradually over time. At first, Albus wrote like an excited boy discovering a new world. Later, he wrote like someone beginning to conquer it. Professors praised him constantly. Students admired him. He excelled in nearly every subject with startling ease. His essays impressed older scholars. Advanced magical theory fascinated him endlessly. Even from far away, his brilliance filled the house. Sometimes Kendra smiled proudly, after reading certain passages aloud. A professor told him he has one of the finest minds Hogwarts has seen in years, she said once, while folding the letter carefully. Aberforth nodded without replying. He already knew. Everyone knew. Yet while Albus soared higher into academic greatness, life inside the Dumbledore house grew heavier each month. Ariana's condition worsened steadily. Her moments of peace became shorter, her magic more violent. Some evenings passed quietly enough that they almost resembled ordinary family life. Kendra cooking supper, Ariana humming softly near the fire, Aberforth feeding scraps beneath the table to a goat he was technically forbidden from keeping indoors. Other nights descended into chaos. One winter storm frightened Ariana badly enough that magical force burst through half the upstairs hallway, tearing wallpaper from walls and cracking wooden beams. Kendra spent nearly 2 hours containing the damage, while Ariana sobbed uncontrollably afterward. When it finally ended, Kendra collapsed into a chair near the kitchen table, pale with exhaustion. Aberforth remembered staring at her hands. They shook constantly now. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "So should you. I'm not tired." It was partly true. Responsibility had begun replacing childhood inside him so completely that ordinary exhaustion felt distant. As years passed, Aberforth increasingly noticed how isolated their family had become. Visitors rarely came to the house anymore. Villagers remained polite from distance, but cautious up close. Rumors still surrounded Percival's imprisonment, despite the family's silence. And Ariana herself could never safely exist in public for long. The house became its own small world. Albus visited during holidays, but even those visits carried strange tension beneath the surface. At Hogwarts, he lived among ambition and discovery and admiration. At home, every conversation eventually returned to Ariana. Containment charms, medical theories, safety precautions, damage repair. The contrast frustrated him more than he admitted aloud. Aberforth noticed. He noticed the way Albus sometimes stared out windows during difficult evenings, as though mentally escaping elsewhere. He noticed how quickly Hogwarts stories replaced household conversation whenever possible. He noticed how Albus increasingly approached Ariana's condition like a magical mystery needing solution rather than a wound their family simply endured. One evening, during Christmas holidays, Albus spent nearly an hour explaining complicated magical theory regarding unstable magical suppression while Ariana slept upstairs. "There has to be a pattern to it," he insisted while pacing beside the fireplace. "Magic doesn't simply behave randomly." Aberforth sat nearby, sharpening tools for repairing a broken fence outside. "She's not behaving randomly," he said finally. Albus stopped pacing. "What?" "She's frightened all the time." "That isn't the same thing." "It looks the same to me." The silence afterwards stretched awkwardly. Neither brother entirely understood the growing divide between them yet, but it deepened anyway. Unlike Albus, Aberforth received little encouragement toward greatness. When his own Hogwarts years finally arrived, expectations surrounding him remained modest from the beginning. Professors recognized him as capable enough, though nowhere near extraordinary. He performed best in practical subjects involving creatures and hands-on magic rather than abstract theory. Frankly, he preferred it that way. Hogwarts itself impressed him less than it had impressed Albus. The castle felt beautiful certainly, but also crowded and exhausting. Too many students competing endlessly for recognition. Too many conversations filled with ambition disguised as politeness. Aberforth gravitated naturally toward quieter spaces. The grounds surrounding Hogwarts suited him best. Forest edges, empty hillsides, creature paddocks beyond the castle. He spent more time around animals than classmates whenever possible. Goats remained his particular weakness. Several professors quickly realized he possessed unusual instinct with magical creatures, despite lacking academic polish. Nervous creatures trusted him unexpectedly. Injured animals calmed beneath his touch faster than spells alone could explain. One gamekeeper reportedly remarked that Aberforth understood creatures better than most people understood each other. The statement proved more accurate than anyone intended. Academically, he remained average by Hogwarts standards, and constantly compared to Albus. Teachers rarely meant cruelty by it, but comparisons followed him naturally through the castle. Your brother handled this spell perfectly in his second year. Albus once wrote extraordinary work on this topic. You Dumbledores certainly possess talent. Aberforth grew to hate hearing the family name spoken with expectation attached, because no matter what he accomplished, it always felt measured against someone else's greatness first. He stopped trying to impress anyone. Instead, he focused on surviving school and returning home during holidays where he remained truly needed. Because while Albus increasingly belonged to the world beyond Godric's Hollow, Aberforth never stopped belonging to the family itself. During school breaks, he immediately resumed helping Kendra manage Ariana. Those visits revealed truths Albus only glimpsed briefly. Ariana's condition exhausted everyone constantly. Kendra aged visibly each year beneath the strain. The house itself bore scars from magical outbursts impossible to fully repair. Cracks spread through walls despite repeated enchantments. Certain rooms carried permanent scorch marks. And yet amidst all that damage, moments of tenderness still survived. Ariana trusted Aberforth completely. When frightened during episodes, she reached for him first. When nightmares woke her, she searched for him instinctively. He could sometimes calm her simply by sitting nearby and speaking softly about ordinary things. Animals, weather, clouds drifting over hills, stories about strange goats near Hogwarts grounds. He understood something Albus never fully grasped. Ariana did not need solutions most of the time. She needed comfort. That realization shaped the brothers differently. Albus continued pursuing answers. Aberforth focused on endurance. By his middle Hogwarts years, resentment had begun quietly rooting itself inside him, though he rarely admitted it aloud. Not resentment toward Ariana, never toward her, toward circumstance, toward brilliance itself, toward the unfairness of how burden distributed itself unevenly among people. Albus still possessed dreams, academic ambition, future possibilities. Aberforth increasingly saw only responsibility waiting ahead. One spring evening, during holiday break, he overheard Kendra speaking quietly with Albus after Ariana suffered another violent magical episode upstairs. You mustn't sacrifice your future entirely, Kendra whispered tiredly. You have gifts too important to waste. Aberforth stood silently beyond the doorway listening. Not once had anyone spoken to him that way. Not once had anyone suggested his future mattered beyond helping hold the family together. And perhaps that was the moment bitterness truly began. Small at first, almost invisible, but permanent. Despite everything, Aberforth still loved his brother deeply during those years. That remained the tragedy of it. He admired Albus's brilliance, even while resenting it. He wanted Albus to succeed, while simultaneously hating the distant success created between them. He defended his brother fiercely whenever classmates mocked his family history. But somewhere deep inside, he already feared something dangerous. Albus belonged increasingly to the world. and the world would eventually take him away completely. Meanwhile, Aberforth belonged to the people left behind. The brother who stayed home. The brother who carried chairs from shattered rooms after magical explosions. The brother who sat awake beside Ariana during long, frightened nights, while letters arrived from Hogwarts describing academic triumphs and brilliant futures. Years later, when history remembered Albus Dumbledore as one of the greatest wizards alive, very few people ever stopped to consider what that greatness cost the family, waiting quietly in Godric's Hollow. But Aberforth remembered. He remembered Kendra falling asleep, exhausted beside extinguished candles. He remembered Ariana trembling after losing control of her own magic yet again. He remembered repairing broken windows during winter storms because no one else could. And slowly, year by year, he learned another painful truth. Some people become legends because someone else remains behind to carry the ordinary suffering they leave untouched. By the summer of 1899, the house in Godric's Hollow no longer resembled a family home, so much as a place built around containment. Protective charms layered the walls so heavily that certain rooms carried a faint metallic hum at night. Curtains remained drawn more often than open. Cracks from magical outbursts had been repaired so many times that some sections of wood and plaster seemed held together more by spellwork than structure. Kendra Dumbledore moved through those rooms like someone carrying invisible weight upon her shoulders every waking hour. Ariana's condition had worsened steadily through the years. There were calm days still, days when she wandered softly through the garden, humming to herself while butterflies drifted around her without harm. But those moments came less often now. Fear triggered explosions of unstable magic with terrifying unpredictability. Sometimes plates shattered merely because someone raised their voice too sharply. Other times, magical force burst outward violently enough to shake the entire house. Aberforth remained closest to her through all of it. He had grown taller by then, broader, through years of physical work and endless repairs around the property. His hands carried permanent roughness from practical labor. Unlike Albus, whose brilliance sharpened into elegant refinement, Aberforth seemed increasingly grounded in ordinary reality. And perhaps because of that, Ariana trusted him most. Albus had recently graduated from Hogwarts in extraordinary fashion. His achievements followed him even into Godric's Hollow through letters, academic praise, and whispered admiration from magical communities across Britain. Professors spoke of him as a future revolutionary mind. Ministry officials had already expressed interest in offering him prestigious positions. Under different circumstances, the summer after graduation should have marked the beginning of a brilliant life. Instead, Albus returned home to responsibility, waiting patiently behind closed doors. At first, Aberforth hoped things might improve. He hoped Albus would finally understand the full reality of life inside the house, now that Hogwarts no longer separated him from it. He hoped responsibility shared between brothers might ease Kendra's exhaustion. But almost immediately, something shifted. Because shortly after Albus returned home, Gellert Grindelwald arrived in Godric's Hollow. The village itself barely noticed him at first. A handsome foreign wizard staying with Bathilda Bagshot attracted mild curiosity and little more. Godric's Hollow had always carried traces of old magic and wandering scholars. Strange visitors occasionally passed through without incident, but Aberforth disliked Grindelwald almost instantly. He first saw him standing outside Bathilda's garden beneath drifting summer sunlight, speaking animatedly with Albus while papers floated through the air between them. Even from distance, Grindelwald carried himself with unsettling confidence. Not simple arrogance exactly, but certainty. the kind of certainty belonging to people who believe ordinary rules no longer apply to them. Albus looked transformed beside him, alive in a way Aberforth had not seen since before Ariana's attack. For the first time in years, Albus laughed freely again. He spoke with excitement rather than exhaustion. Endless conversations stretched late into the evenings between the two young men, while theoretical diagrams and magical notes covered tables inside Batilda's home. At first, Aberforth tried ignoring it. Albus deserved friendship, deserved something beyond grief and responsibility. But gradually those conversations consumed everything. Afternoons once spent helping Kendra increasingly vanished into long discussions with Grindelwald. Research replaced family duty. Dreams replaced reality. And Ariana noticed. One evening, while sitting quietly beside the fire, she asked softly, "Where's Albus?" "Batilda's house," Aberforth replied while repairing cracked wood from another magical outburst earlier that day. "He likes it there more." The sentence landed heavily in the room. Even Kendra paused briefly while preparing tea. Albus and Grindelwald spent hours discussing magic, far beyond ordinary wizarding theory, ancient magical power, revolutionary ideas, the hidden limitations of wizarding society, the possibility of reshaping the world itself. Aberforth overheard fragments often enough to grow deeply uneasy. Wizards hiding from muggles is unnatural. Power should guide lesser people. For the greater good. That phrase appeared constantly. For the greater good. At first, it sounded noble enough. But the more Aberforth heard it, the less he trusted it. Because every time Grindelwald spoke those words, ordinary people somehow mattered less afterward. Especially Ariana. One hot evening near midsummer, Aberforth returned from feeding goats behind the property and found raised voices drifting through the kitchen. Albus and Grindelwald stood near the table, surrounded by scattered papers and maps. Kendra sat nearby, pale with exhaustion, while Ariana remained upstairs after another unstable magical episode earlier that afternoon. "You can't seriously mean to take her traveling across Europe," Kendra said sharply. "She wouldn't be alone," Albus replied. "Ariana can barely survive calm days inside this house. We can manage it together." Grindelwald leaned casually against the wall nearby, watching silently. Aberforth entered without speaking. Kendra looked relieved to see him. "You tell them," she said tiredly. "Tell your brother this madness makes no sense." Albus's expression hardened slightly. "It isn't madness. You're planning some grand adventure while Ariana destroys half the house every other week." Aberforth snapped. "That sounds fairly mad to me." Grindelwald smiled faintly. "You underestimate your brother's vision, and you overestimate yours." Silence followed immediately. Grindelwald's eyes narrowed with sudden coldness beneath the charm he usually wore so easily. For the first time, Aberforth recognized something dangerous hiding beneath his polished intelligence. Not merely ambition, cruelty, subtle but unmistakable. Albus stepped between them verbally before tension escalated further. "You don't understand what we're trying to accomplish." "No," Aberforth replied. "I understand perfectly. You're trying to escape." The words struck harder than intended. Albus looked genuinely wounded, but he said nothing in return. Over the following weeks, the divide between the brothers widened rapidly. Albus became consumed by dreams, larger than the cramped suffering inside the Dumbledore house. Grindelwald fed those dreams constantly. Together they spoke of changing wizarding society itself, ending secrecy, establishing wizard rule openly over muggles for what they insisted would be everyone's benefit, always for the greater good. Aberforth heard enough to feel sick whenever the phrase surfaced now. Because meanwhile, reality inside the house grew worse each day. Kendra's health visibly declined beneath exhaustion. Ariana's magical episodes became more dangerous. Household repairs never truly ended. Entire nights passed without proper sleep after violent outbursts shattered walls or furniture. And Albus increasingly disappeared into plans for future greatness. One stormy evening, Ariana suffered one of her worst magical episodes yet, after a loud argument erupted downstairs between Albus and Kendra. Unstable force burst through the upper hallway, violently enough to crack support beams and shatter nearly every window facing the garden. Aberforth fought through flying debris to reach Ariana first. She crouched terrified in the corner while magical energy tore books from shelves around her like invisible storms. "It's all right," he kept repeating despite the chaos. "It's all right." Downstairs, afterward, while Kendra rested pale and trembling beside the fire, Aberforth finally lost patience entirely. "You weren't even here when it started," he said toward Albus. "I came back immediately." "That isn't the point." Albus's own frustration erupted then. "And what exactly would satisfy you, Aberforth? Staying trapped in this house forever? Watching everything fall apart until there's nothing left of any of us?" The words echoed harshly through the damaged room. Ariana whimpered faintly upstairs. Aberforth stared at his brother in disbelief. "There it is," he said quietly. "That's what this really is." "What? You hate being here?" Albus looked away, and that silence answered everything. Later that night, Aberforth sat beside Ariana's bed while rain tapped softly against repaired windows. She slept restlessly beneath blankets, while faint sparks occasionally drifted from her fingertips. Downstairs, muffled voices continued between Albus and Grindelwald long after midnight. Plans, dreams, revolutions. Aberforth listened from the dark hallway, feeling something colder than anger settling slowly inside him, because he finally understood the terrible difference between himself and his brother. Albus still believed greatness justified sacrifice. Aberforth did not. As summer deepened, Grindelwald's influence over Albus became impossible to ignore. Albus spoke differently now, more intensely, more impatiently. The old thoughtful caution remained, but ambition increasingly burned brighter beneath it. Together they researched the Deathly Hallows obsessively, ancient magical artifacts rumored to grant mastery over death itself, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. To Albus and Grindelwald, the Hallows represented possibility. To Aberforth, they represented escape fantasies distracting from reality. One evening, he entered the kitchen to find maps spread across the table, while Albus and Grindelwald debated travel routes through Europe. "We'd begin in Eastern Europe," Grindelwald explained eagerly. "There are records there older than British ministry archives." "And Ariana?" Aberforth interrupted. Albus rubbed tiredly at his forehead. "We already discussed this." "No, you ignored it. We can't keep sacrificing everything forever." The sentence hung heavily between them. Aberforth looked at his brother for a long moment. "She's your sister. She's yours too. And I'm still here." Grindelwald exhaled impatiently. "You think too small." Aberforth turned toward him immediately. "And you think people are tools." For the first time, genuine hostility flashed openly across Grindelwald's face. It vanished quickly behind another smooth smile, but Aberforth had seen enough. He understood now exactly what frightened him about the man. Grindelwald viewed suffering abstractly, as obstacle, as necessary cost. as weakness delaying greater destiny. Albus, brilliant and restless and exhausted by years of confinement, had begun listening. Kendra understood the danger too. Late one evening, after Ariana finally slept peacefully, she spoke quietly with Aberforth alone beside the kitchen fire. "I'm losing him," she whispered. Aberforth knew she did not mean death. Not yet. "He still cares," he said. "Yes," Kendra replied sadly, "but caring and staying are not always the same thing." Outside, summer wind moved softly through dark hills surrounding Godric's Hollow. Inside, the Dumbledore family drifted steadily toward catastrophe without fully realizing it. Albus believed he stood at the beginning of greatness, beside the only person who truly matched his mind. Grindelwald believed he had found the perfect partner for revolution, and Aberforth, sitting quietly beside sleeping Ariana, night after night, understood something neither of them wished to face. Some dreams become dangerous the moment human beings matter less than the future being imagined. The end of the summer arrived beneath heavy heat and gathering storms. Godric's Hollow seemed strangely still during those final weeks before tragedy struck the Dumbledore family completely apart. The air carried the thick quietness that often comes before rain, when even birds fall silent among the trees and distant hills blur beneath unmoving grey clouds. Inside the Dumbledore house, tension pressed constantly against every room. Kendra's health had worsened sharply. Exhaustion hollowed her face, and shadows lingered permanently beneath her eyes now. She still moved through the house with determination, still cared for Ariana with fierce devotion, but the effort drained her visibly. Ariana herself drifted through days like someone balanced between worlds. Some mornings, she seemed almost peaceful, sitting beside windows, humming softly, while light danced faintly around her fingertips. Other days, fear overwhelmed her without warning. An unstable magic burst violently through the house. Aberforth remained near her whenever possible. Albus remained increasingly absent. Not physically at first, but emotionally. His thoughts lived elsewhere now beside Grindelwald, and dreams of revolution and greatness. Even when sitting inside the family kitchen, part of him seemed already halfway across Europe, chasing ancient magic and imagined futures. Aberforth noticed it constantly. One evening, shortly before everything ended, he found Albus and Grindelwald speaking quietly together in the garden, while dusk settled across the hills. Ariana had suffered another difficult episode earlier that afternoon, leaving half the upstairs corridor damaged by magical force. Yet neither of them discussed Ariana. They discussed the Deathly Hallows. "The resurrection stone changes everything," Grindelwald said quietly, excitement flickering in his pale eyes. "Imagine what wizarding society could become freed from fear of death itself." Albus nodded slowly. "And the Elder Wand would ensure nobody could oppose us." Us. Aberforth hated that word suddenly. He stepped into the garden before thinking better of it. "Ariana nearly destroyed the upper floor today," he snapped. "Mother collapsed afterward from exhaustion. But I'm glad you two found time for fairy tales." Albus frowned immediately. "They aren't fairy tales." "That's your concern?" Grindelwald folded his arms calmly. "You mistake ambition for cruelty." "No," Aberforth replied coldly. "I mistake neglect for neglect." Silence followed. Storm clouds rolled slowly across the darkening sky above them. Albus looked genuinely torn for a moment. The old guilt still lived inside him, somewhere beneath ambition and exhaustion. But Grindelwald spoke before that guilt could fully surface. "You cannot spend your entire life trapped here." The sentence struck harder because part of Albus clearly agreed. Aberforth saw it in his brother's eyes immediately, and something inside him hardened permanently. That night, Ariana woke screaming from nightmares shortly after midnight. Violent magical force burst through her bedroom walls hard enough to rattle windows throughout the house. Aberforth reached her first. She crouched, trembling beside the bed, while sparks exploded wildly around the room. "He's leaving," she whispered repeatedly through tears. "Albus is leaving." Aberforth froze briefly. Children like Ariana often sensed emotional truths before anyone spoke them aloud. He held her carefully while unstable magic flickered across the ceiling. "Nobody's leaving tonight," he said quietly. But he no longer believed it himself. The final argument came 2 days later. The morning itself began almost peacefully. Rain drifted softly against the windows while Kendra prepared breakfast downstairs. Ariana sat quietly near the fire, wrapped in blankets. For once, the house carried brief, fragile calm. Then Aberforth overheard Albus and Grindelwald discussing plans again. Travel routes, departure dates, future alliances. And Ariana described not as family, but obstacle. Something inside him finally snapped. He entered the kitchen abruptly, while Grindelwald spread maps across the table beside Albus. "You're still planning to leave," Aberforth said. Albus looked up immediately, tiredness already visible in his expression. "We've discussed this." "No, you've ignored it." Grindelwald sighed softly. "This endless argument changes nothing." Aberforth rounded on him instantly. "You stay out of this." "Why?" Grindelwald asked coolly. "Because someone should finally say what everyone here knows. Your brother is wasting himself inside this house." Ariana flinched visibly near the fireplace. Kendra rose immediately. "That's enough." But nobody listened anymore. "You think you're helping him?" Aberforth shouted toward Grindelwald. "You've filled his head with fantasies, while Mother's killing herself trying to hold this family together." Grindelwald's calm mask cracked slightly. "And what exactly do you offer him instead? More years trapped here, caring for a sister beyond saving?" The room fell completely silent. Even Ariana stopped moving. Aberforth stared at Grindelwald in disbelief, then slowly toward Albus, waiting for his brother to deny those words completely. Albus hesitated, only for a moment, but that moment changed everything. Aberforth saw the truth clearly then. Part of Albus believed it too. "She's our sister," Aberforth said quietly. "And I love her," Albus replied immediately. "But you still want to leave." Albus closed his eyes briefly. "You don't understand." "No," Aberforth whispered. "I finally do." The argument exploded afterward with terrifying speed. Years of exhaustion and resentment poured suddenly into the room all at once. Aberforth accused Albus of abandoning the family. Albus accused Aberforth of trapping everyone inside endless suffering. Grindelwald mocked responsibility itself as weakness, disguised as loyalty. Voices rose sharply. Ariana began crying. Magic flickered violently around the room. Kendra tried desperately to stop the argument before Ariana lost control completely, but nobody heard her. Then Aberforth said the thing he should perhaps never have said aloud. "You care more about him than your own family now." Silence hit instantly. Albus's face changed, and Grindelwald's expression darkened with immediate fury. The first spell came from Grindelwald. Aberforth never fully remembered which curse it was. Light erupted suddenly across the kitchen while furniture shattered backward from magical force. Instinct took over immediately afterward. Aberforth drew his wand. Albus shouted something. Then chaos consumed everything. Spells flashed violently through the room, in blinding bursts of light. Tables overturned, windows exploded outward. Magical force cracked across walls already weakened by years of Ariana's instability. Aberforth fought mostly through anger and instinct. Grindelwald moved beautifully and terribly, every spell precise with frightening confidence. Albus tried repeatedly to stop the duel, while simultaneously defending himself and countering attacks from both sides. Everything blurred together afterward. Light, shouting, crashing wood, Ariana screaming. Then suddenly she stood between them. Aberforth remembered that moment forever in terrible detail. Ariana stepping forward, trembling and terrified while magic tore through the room around her. He remembered Albus shouting her name. He remembered Grindelwald turning sharply. He remembered a flash of light. Only one, and then silence. The room seemed to stop breathing. Ariana collapsed slowly onto the floor. At first, nobody moved. Nobody understood. Then Kendra screamed. Aberforth dropped his wand immediately and fell beside Ariana. Her eyes remained open slightly, confusion still frozen inside them. Tiny traces of magic flickered weakly around her fingers before fading slowly away. Ariana. No response. Ariana. His voice broke completely the second time. Across the room, Albus stood motionless in horror. Grindelwald stared at Ariana's body with stunned disbelief for perhaps only seconds before survival instinct overtook everything else. He fled, without apology, without farewell. One moment he stood there among shattered furniture and smoke. The next, he vanished entirely from the Dumbledore house and from Albus's life for many years afterward. Aberforth barely noticed. The world had narrowed entirely around Ariana, lying lifeless in his arms. Nobody ever knew whose curse killed her. Not truly. Perhaps Grindelwald's. Perhaps Albus's. Perhaps even Aberforth's own spell, redirected through chaos and unstable magic. The uncertainty poisoned everything afterward, because blame without certainty never heals properly. It only lingers. The hours following Ariana's death passed like nightmare fragments stitched together through grief. Kendra sat beside Ariana's body, unable to speak for long stretches of time. Albus wandered through damaged rooms, pale as death itself, staring at walls without seeing them. Aberforth remained beside Ariana until dawn. He held her hand long after warmth faded from it. Outside, rain finally began falling heavily against the ruined house. The funeral came quietly several days later, beneath dark grey skies. Very few people attended. The Dumbledore family had become too isolated through years of secrecy and shame. Bathilda Bagshot stood among the small gathering, looking deeply grieved. A handful of villagers offered quiet condolences from distance, but most of the world continued moving, untouched by Ariana Dumbledore's death. To them, she remained almost invisible, even in dying. That truth enraged Aberforth more than he could express. Albus stood beside the grave like a man already haunted. His face looked older somehow, hollowed by guilt so deep it seemed carved directly into him. When the service ended and mourners slowly drifted away, Aberforth finally turned toward his brother fully. For several long moments, neither spoke. Rain tapped softly against gravestones around them, while wind moved through wet grass. Then Albus whispered the words he would carry forever. "I'm sorry." Aberforth struck him before he finished speaking. The punch landed hard enough to break Albus's nose instantly. Gasps rose nearby, but Aberforth barely heard them. Years of exhaustion and grief and helplessness poured through that single blow. Not because he hated Albus, because he loved him enough for betrayal to hurt. Albus staggered backward, holding blood against his face, but made no attempt to defend himself. Perhaps he believed he deserved worse. After Ariana's funeral, the Dumbledore house became unbearably empty. No more frightened footsteps upstairs. No more sudden magical explosions rattling walls at midnight. No more soft humming beside the fire. The silence itself felt unnatural. Kendra moved through rooms like someone already partially gone herself. Something essential inside her had died alongside Ariana. She spoke little, slept rarely. And Albus changed completely. Before Ariana's death, ambition burned through him brightly enough to illuminate entire rooms. Afterward, guilt replaced it. Not entirely, never entirely, but enough that the old certainty vanished forever. Aberforth watched his brother carefully during those weeks. Sometimes Albus sat alone for hours, staring at nothing beside extinguished fireplaces. Sometimes he wandered through Ariana's empty room, touching damaged walls as though searching for answers still hidden there. But Aberforth could not comfort him. Not yet. Perhaps not ever fully again. Because every time he looked at Albus now, he remembered that terrible hesitation before the duel began, that moment when Albus failed to deny wanting escape from them all. And somewhere deep inside, Aberforth believed Ariana sensed it too. The tragedy of the Dumbledore family was never simply that Ariana died. It was that everyone surviving afterward carried different versions of guilt impossible to separate cleanly from love. Aberforth blamed Grindelwald. He blamed Albus. Sometimes, in darker moments, he blamed himself. Most painfully of all, he understood that Albus blamed himself more than anyone else ever could. Years later, the wizarding world would speak endlessly about the legendary duel between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald. But Aberforth remembered something different. Not legends, not greatness. Only 3 frightened young people destroying the last fragile pieces of a broken family, while a girl who deserved gentleness died in the middle of their ambitions. After Ariana's death, Aberforth Dumbledore did not become the sort of man who searched for comfort in grand explanations. He had heard enough grand explanations already. He had heard speeches about destiny, about power, about the greater good, about what gifted wizards owed the world, and what ordinary people should be willing to sacrifice beneath the weight of history. He had watched those ideas enter his home like bright fire through an open door, beautiful at first, then destructive, then impossible to control. So when the years began to pass, Aberforth chose something smaller. He chose work. He chose distance. He chose a place where nobody expected softness from him, and where nobody asked too many questions about grief. The Hogshead Inn in Hogsmeade was not the sort of establishment polished families spoke of with affection. It stood away from the warmer brightness of the 3 broomsticks, rougher in spirit and darker in atmosphere, its sign creaking in cold wind, while the painted boar's head above the door looked as though it had survived more weather than any living creature should. Snow gathered along the roof in winter. Rain streaked the windows in spring. Smoke curled from the chimney with a stubbornness that suited the man who eventually came to keep the place. Inside, the rooms were dim and low-ceilinged. The floorboards complained beneath every step. Tables bore marks from years of spilled drinks, rough hands, whispered bargains, and the occasional one burn. The air carried old smells of smoke, damp wool, strong drink, and creatures that may or may not have belonged indoors. It was not elegant. That was partly why Aberforth liked it. Elegance had never impressed him. Too often, elegance hid rot beneath polished surfaces. He preferred places that showed their flaws honestly. A crack table was a crack table. A rude customer was a rude customer. Bad ale was bad ale, though he would never admit his was bad if anyone dared say so aloud. The hogshead suited him because it made no pretense of greatness. No one entered expecting refinement. No one arrived hoping to meet famous people beneath golden candlelight. It was a place for those who preferred shadows over attention, corners over crowds, and silence over performance. Travelers came through with mud on their boots and secrets in their pockets. Goblins passed through occasionally. Unsavory witches muttered over private business. Students sometimes dared one another to step inside, then quickly regretted it after seeing Aberforth's expression from behind the bar. He watched them all with equal suspicion. Behind that suspicion, however, was a sharper mind than most people guessed. Aberforth had learned early that people underestimated roughness. They mistook blunt speech for stupidity, dirty windows for ignorance, silence for disinterest. He rarely corrected them. Being underestimated was useful. It allowed him to listen. And the Hogshead was a good place for listening. News drifted into the inn before it reached respectable rooms. Rumours arrived carried by tired travellers and half-drunk men who believed shadows swallowed words. Ministry scandals were whispered there before appearing in newspapers. Dark alliances passed through, unnoticed, by those who only watched polished drawing rooms. Deals were made in corners. Plans suggested over cheap drinks. Warnings hidden inside casual remarks. Aberforth listened without seeming to listen. He wiped glasses, fed the fire, grumbled at customers, threatened to throw people out if they caused trouble, and remembered everything. In those years, Albus Dumbledore's name grew steadily larger. His brother entered the wider wizarding world as everyone had always known he would. Brilliant scholar, powerful wizard, teacher, public figure, man of wisdom, man of secrets. People spoke of him with reverence long before he became headmaster of Hogwarts. His achievements multiplied until they seemed less like events and more like natural weather surrounding the age. Aberforth heard the name often from customers, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with irritation, sometimes with awe. He rarely reacted. If anyone asked whether he was related to the great Albus Dumbledore, he gave answers so sharp and unpleasant that most people learned not to ask twice. But he listened. He heard how others described his brother. Noble, brilliant, kindly, powerful, mysterious, all true in their ways, all incomplete. To Aberforth, Albus was never only the great wizard smiling above half-moon spectacles. He was the boy beside a stream in mould on the wold, the older brother who once made Ariana laugh with dancing lights, the young man who had been seduced by Grindelwald's vision, the wizard who might never know which spell killed their sister. Aberforth could not hate him simply. That would have been easier. Instead, he carried something far more complicated. Love tangled with anger, loyalty knotted around resentment, grief sharpened by memory. There were years when the brothers barely spoke, not because all feeling between them had died, but because too much feeling remained. When they did meet, the conversations were usually brief and uncomfortable. Albus might visit Hogsmeade under some formal pretense and stop by the inn late when few customers remained. Aberforth would stand behind the bar, arms folded, expression unreadable. "You look tired," Albus might say softly. "So do you." A silence. "Are you well?" "Well enough." Another silence. Then Albus would ask about business or local rumours, or some matter he pretended was the reason for coming. Aberforth would answer only what needed answering. The rest sat between them like Ariana's portrait, invisible but present. Neither brother knew how to cross it. Aberforth built his life around the refusal to be impressed. That became one of his defenses. Important people came and went through the village. Ministry officials, scholars, old families with long names and longer memories. He served them all with the same rough impatience. If they expected special treatment, they left disappointed. If they used too many fancy words, he ignored half of them. If they praised Albus too warmly in his presence, he found some excuse to walk away. The world admired brilliance. Aberforth had seen what brilliance could excuse. He preferred plainness, plain work, plain speech, plain loyalty. The animals helped. No account of Aberforth Dumbledore can honestly avoid the goats. They followed his life like a strange and persistent thread, appearing in rumors, jokes, ministry records, and whispered school stories. To many people, his fondness for goats seemed ridiculous, another oddity attached to an already difficult man. But for Aberforth, creatures were never ridiculous. They were honest company. Goats especially possessed the exact kind of stubborn, unimpressed nature he understood. They did not care about famous names. They did not flatter power. They did not speak in noble phrases while stepping over the suffering of others. They wanted food, shelter, space, and occasionally the right to destroy a fence for reasons known only to themselves. Aberforth respected that. Behind the hog's head, he kept them with more tenderness than most customers ever received. He repaired their shelter himself. He fed them before feeding himself on bitter winter mornings. When one grew ill, he stayed awake through the night beside it, muttering insults at the creature with the same tone another person might use for prayer. Anyone foolish enough to mock them too openly risked being thrown out. The infamous incident involving inappropriate charms on a goat became one of those stories people repeated with more confidence than accuracy. The ministry involved itself. Newspapers enjoyed the scandal far more than the facts deserved. Aberforth was prosecuted, or at least questioned, depending on which version one heard, and his name became attached to jokes that followed him for decades. He endured it with characteristic contempt. Public shame had little power over someone who had already survived private devastation. Compared with losing Ariana, laughter from strangers meant almost nothing. If anything, the goat scandal strengthened the wall between Aberforth and respectable society. People who already thought him strange now had proof, or believed they did. They could dismiss him more easily, reduce him to gossip, the odd brother, the rough one, the embarrassment beside Albus Dumbledore's rising legend. Aberforth allowed them to think it. There was freedom in being misjudged. The Hog's Head became both refuge and fortress. Its rough reputation kept away the sort of people Aberforth least wished to entertain. Polished society preferred cleaner rooms elsewhere. Ministry officials came only when they had to. Ordinary travelers, suspicious figures, and those with nowhere better to go became the inn's natural customers. Aberforth understood such people. He did not sentimentalize them. Many were dangerous. Many were foolish. Some were cruel, but they were rarely disguised as saints. And after Grindelwald, Aberforth had developed a lifelong distrust of polished saints. Occasionally, Hogwarts students wandered inside. Most came on dares, faces bright with nervous excitement, whispering about the place as though entering a haunted ruin. Aberforth watched from behind the bar with narrowed eyes until they ordered something harmless and sat huddled together, pretending not to be frightened. He found them annoying. He also watched over them more carefully than he admitted. If an older wizard took too much interest in a student, Aberforth noticed. If someone slipped something suspicious into a drink, Aberforth removed the drink before the student touched it. If business in a corner began turning too dark while children were present, he ended it without explanation. He was not gentle about protection, but protection did not require gentleness. This was one of the deep truths of Aberforth's life. He rarely appeared kind in the way people expected kindness to appear. He did not smile warmly. He did not offer comforting speeches. He did not wrap concern in beautiful language, but he acted. And action, to Aberforth, mattered more than words. The years moved on. Hogsmeade changed slowly around him. Students came and graduated. Teachers arrived and departed. Winters buried the village beneath white silence, then melted into muddy spring. The castle above the village remained constant, its towers rising against the sky like memory itself. Aberforth could see Hogwarts from certain places near the inn. That fact mattered more than he would ever say. Albus belonged to that castle increasingly as the decades passed. Even before becoming headmaster, he seemed woven into its life. Students admired him, colleagues respected him. The magical world looked toward him whenever darkness stirred. Aberforth remained below, in the village, behind a stained counter in a room that smelled of smoke and old ale. The contrast was almost too neat. One brother above, surrounded by candles and learning and reverence. One brother below, among dust and goats and men with secrets. Yet Aberforth never truly believed himself beneath Albus. Not in the ways that mattered. Albus had greatness. Aberforth had memory, and memory kept him from worshipping what others worshipped. When people praised Albus's wisdom, Aberforth remembered the summer of Grindelwald. When they spoke of his compassion, Aberforth remembered Ariana alone in that house. When they called him the greatest wizard of the age, Aberforth remembered that greatness had once nearly led him away from his family forever. But he also remembered Albus's grief. That was the difficult part. He remembered his brother standing at Ariana's grave with blood on his face and guilt hollowing him from within. He remembered how Albus never tried to defend himself after Aberforth struck him. He remembered the terrible possibility that Albus's entire life afterward had been one long act of penance. Such knowledge prevented clean bitterness. So Aberforth settled for distance. Distance allowed love to remain without requiring forgiveness too quickly. And perhaps that was why he stayed in Hogsmeade all those years, close enough to Hogwarts that Albus was never entirely gone, far enough that the wound between them could remain undisturbed. There were nights in the Hog's Head when business slowed and snow pressed softly against the windows. Aberforth would stand alone behind the bar while the fire burned low, listening to the buildings settle around him. In such moments, the past returned quietly. Ariana's laughter in the garden, Kendra's tired hands, Percival's final instruction to look after the family, Albus's face before ambition changed it, the flash of light in the room where Ariana fell. He never spoke these memories aloud. What would be the point? People loved stories that could be made simple. A bitter brother, a strange barman, a goat-loving eccentric, a lesser Dumbledore hidden in the shadow of a great one. The truth was heavier and less convenient. Aberforth had not failed because he lacked greatness. He had simply chosen not to chase it. He had seen too clearly where the chase could lead. So he kept his inn, fed his goats, listened to rumors, snapped at fools, helped when help was needed, and denied afterward that he had done anything of significance. It was not the life others might have imagined for a Dumbledore, but it was his, and in the quiet stubbornness of that life, there was a kind of dignity the wizarding world rarely knew how to recognize. When darkness rose again in the wizarding world, Aberforth Dumbledore recognized its shape before many people were willing to name it. He had seen ambition wrapped in noble language before. He had heard powerful men speak about necessary sacrifices, about order, about destiny, about the people who had to suffer so that others might inherit a cleaner future. Long before Lord Voldemort became a name, people feared to speak aloud. Aberforth had learned to distrust any wizard who believed himself chosen to stand above ordinary lives. So when rumors began reaching the Hog's Head Inn, he listened carefully. At first, they were only fragments: a missing witch from the north, a muggle-born family frightened into leaving their home, strange symbols appearing in private letters, old pure-blood names spoken with renewed confidence by men who had been quiet for years. The ministry, as usual, preferred delay over truth. Officials softened language. Newspapers framed incidents as isolated disturbances. Respectable families lowered their voices and pretended fear had not yet entered their homes. But fear travels differently in places like the Hog's Head. It comes through side doors. It sits in corners. It drinks quickly and speaks too much after midnight. Aberforth heard things there that never reached polished offices. Travelers muttered about masked figures gathering in distant villages. A hag from Diagon Alley described seeing young wizards practicing curses beneath abandoned railway arches. A goblin carrying old burn scars warned that old prejudices were becoming fashionable again. Aberforth believed them, not because he trusted people easily, because fear leaves a particular sound in the voice. He knew that sound. The first Wizarding War did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like cold through cracks in a badly repaired window. 1 month, a name disappeared from conversation. The next, a shop closed without explanation. Then came attacks too bold to dismiss, bodies found in places where warnings were meant to be read, families vanishing in the night, while neighbors claimed to have noticed nothing unusual. The Hog's Head grew quieter in some ways and busier in others. Ordinary customers came less often after dark. Nervous travelers appeared more frequently. People wanted private rooms, corners away from windows, drinks they could hold without actually drinking. Aberforth served them with his usual rough impatience, but he watched. He watched who entered with arrogance and who entered afraid. He watched which old families suddenly seemed confident again. He watched which young wizards wore cruelty awkwardly, like robes they had not yet grown into. Above the village, Hogwarts remained lit against the night, and within it, Albus Dumbledore became once more the figure people turned toward when darkness gathered. That was inevitable. It always had been. Albus had defeated Grindelwald decades earlier, and the shadow of that victory still followed him. To many, he was proof that even the greatest dark wizard could be stopped. He was wise, powerful, patient, and difficult to intimidate. His presence alone steadied people who might otherwise have surrendered to fear. Aberforth understood this. He even respected it. But respect was never the same as worship. When customers spoke of Albus as though he existed beyond ordinary flaw, Aberforth continued wiping glasses as if he had heard nothing. Sometimes, if the praise grew too sentimental, he made a noise of irritation deep in his throat and turned away. He knew better than anyone that his brother was not made of light alone. Yet he also knew something else. Albus would stand against Voldemort. Whatever bitterness remained between them, Aberforth never doubted that. There was a strange comfort in knowing his brother's faults so completely, and still recognizing his courage. The Order of the Phoenix formed quietly during those dangerous years. Most people knew nothing of it. They knew only that certain witches and wizards seemed to vanish into secrecy, that Albus Dumbledore met with trusted allies, that resistance existed somewhere beyond official ministry statements. Aberforth was not the sort of man who attended meetings filled with noble speeches. He had no patience for circles of brave people explaining bravery to one another. He disliked strategy discussed over polished tables. He disliked being told what sacrifice required by those still young enough to find the word beautiful. But that did not mean he did nothing. The Hog's Head became useful precisely because it looked useless. No respectable Death Eater expected heroism to organize itself beneath a grimy sign and smoky rafters. No ministry official believed the rough barman heard anything worth reporting. No frightened traveler imagined Aberforth remembered every detail of their whispered warnings. But he did. Information passed through him, like water through stone cracks, slowly shaping hidden paths. A witch fleeing from Devon mentioned a safe house had been compromised. Aberforth made sure the warning reached someone who could act on it. A drunken wizard boasted too loudly about a meeting near the coast. Aberforth closed the inn early, then sent word through channels he never described. A young man with shaking hands asked whether anyone in Hogsmeade knew how to contact Dumbledore. Aberforth did not ask which Dumbledore he meant. He simply told him to wait near the back room and stop looking so obvious. These were small acts. Small acts mattered. Aberforth trusted them more than grand gestures. The war worsened. Names became memorials. Families disappeared. The dark mark burned above houses, and even those who never saw it with their own eyes began imagining it in every strange glow against the sky. Hogsmeade itself changed under the pressure. Laughter grew shorter. Shopkeepers glanced out windows more often. Students visiting from Hogwarts moved in tighter groups and returned to the castle before dusk. Parents wrote anxious letters. Professors watched corridors carefully. Aberforth watched the students most of all. They reminded him of the fragility adults too often forgot. Young faces trying to appear brave, while fear gathered at the edges of their lives. Some belonged to pureblood families, already choosing sides at dinner tables. Some belonged to Muggle-born children, suddenly understanding that parts of the world hated them for existing. Some knew nothing yet, protected by childhood from the full shape of war approaching them. He could not save them all. He knew that, but he could watch the doors. If suspicious figures lingered too close while students visited Hogsmeade, Aberforth noticed. If strangers asked too many questions about school schedules, he remembered their faces. If children entered the Hog's Head on dares, he drove them out more harshly than necessary, because fear was better than danger. They thought him cruel. That did not trouble him. Better a frightened child alive than a comfortable one noticed by the wrong adult. During those years, Aberforth and Albus spoke more often than they had in decades, though still rarely with ease. War forced old wounds into temporary quiet. There were messages to pass, warnings to consider, names to confirm, movements to track. Albus sometimes came to the inn late, wearing plain traveling cloaks instead of the brighter robes others associated with him. He would sit near the back, where shadows softened his face, and ask careful questions. Who told you this? Someone frightened enough to be believed. Did they give a name? No, but they gave a scar, a limp, and a habit of tapping the table with 2 fingers. That enough for your clever lot? Sometimes Albus smiled faintly despite himself. The old brotherly rhythm had not died entirely. It only lived beneath too much ash. Yet even in wartime, the distance remained. Albus still carried secrets like second skin. Aberforth felt them in every pause. His brother never told the whole story, unless forced. never opened every door inside his mind, never trusted anyone fully with the machinery of his plans. Aberforth hated that about him. He also knew it made Albus effective against men like Voldemort. That was another bitter truth. The qualities that damaged families could sometimes defend worlds. The war had a way of making moral clarity difficult. Aberforth disliked difficulty in morals. He preferred simple lines. Protect the helpless. Refuse cruelty. Do not make people into tools. Do not speak of the greater good while stepping over someone bleeding at your feet. Voldemort and his followers violated those truths openly, so Aberforth resisted them. Not because he loved institutions, not because he trusted the ministry, not because he believed in heroic legends, because evil had become plain enough that even a man tired of causes could recognize the need to stand against it. The Hog's Head saw terrible things during those years. A wizard arrived one night with blood on his sleeve and no memory of how he had escaped an ambush. Aberforth gave him fire whiskey, cleaned the wound badly but effectively, and sent for someone better suited to healing. A young witch came searching for her brother, who had joined the wrong crowd and vanished. Aberforth had seen the boy 2 weeks earlier, laughing too loudly with men whose faces he distrusted. He told her what little he knew, then watched her leave with grief already forming around her shoulders. An old goblin left a sealed message beneath a loose floorboard and never returned for the reply. Aberforth kept every secret that deserved keeping and broke every secret that protected murderers. He had no use for neutrality. Neutrality, in his experience, usually favored whoever was already holding the wand. As Voldemort grew stronger, the wizarding world became more divided between those who feared him, those who served him, and those who pretended they could remain untouched. Aberforth despised the last group most quietly. Cowardice dressed as caution reminded him too much of officials who had once condemned Percival without caring to understand why he acted. The ministry stumbled often. Of course it did. Bureaucracies rarely know what to do with terror until terror reaches their own doors. Albus worked around it as much as through it. The Order moved in shadows. Auras fought where they could. Families hid. Messages traveled by methods safer than Owlpost. Trust became rare currency. Aberforth's Inn remained one of many small hidden points in that wider web of resistance. He never called it that. He would have rejected the phrase if anyone used it near him. But people who needed warnings received them. People who needed temporary shelter sometimes found the back room available without explanation. People being followed were occasionally told to leave through the rear door, while Aberforth started an argument loud enough to distract everyone in the bar. His help was never soft. It often sounded like insult. Get out, and if you come back through the front door, you're thicker than you look. Those who survived understood eventually. Those who did not often thought him merely rude. Again, he did not care. When the war reached its darkest stretches, even Aberforth felt the weight of it pressing against the village. There were nights when no customers came at all, when snow gathered outside and the castle windows shone faintly above Hogsmeade like distant stars. On such nights, he stood alone behind the bar, with only the goats shifting in their shelter outside and the fire burning low. He thought of Ariana then, not always directly. Sometimes memory came through sound, a faint crack in the fire recalling broken windows, wind against the inn sign recalling the night rain fell after she died, a girl's laugh from the street recalling something gentler and older than war. He wondered what she would have thought of this new darkness. He wondered whether Albus still thought of her before making decisions that risked other people's lives. He suspected the answer was yes, that did not comfort him entirely. Eventually, the First Wizarding War ended in a way nobody expected, not with Albus defeating Voldemort in some grand duel, not with Ministry triumph, not with the Order claiming victory beneath banners and speeches. It ended in a cottage in Godric's Hollow, the same village where Aberforth's own family had once broken apart. James and Lily Potter died there protecting their son. Voldemort vanished. A baby survived. The wizarding world erupted into relief so sudden it almost resembled madness. People celebrated in streets. Strangers embraced. Fireworks burst over villages that had spent years hiding their lights. Aberforth did not celebrate loudly. He had seen too much to trust endings that arrived too cleanly. But he understood relief. He felt it in the quieter way older grief allows. A loosening in the chest, a breath released after years held too long. Fewer frightened faces in corners. Fewer messages passed beneath tables. Fewer children walking through Hogsmeade with danger at their backs. Albus came to the Hog's Head not long after. The inn was nearly empty. Outside, the village still carried echoes of celebration. But inside, the fire burned low and amber across dusty tables. For a while, neither brother spoke. Then Aberforth said, "It's over then." Albus looked older than he had in years. For now, Aberforth studied him carefully. There it was again, the secret behind the answer. The refusal to believe darkness gone simply because people wanted dawn to last forever. This time, Aberforth did not argue. He only poured 2 drinks and set one before his brother. They drank in silence. Not forgiveness, not peace, but something close enough for one evening after a war. The years ahead would prove Albus right, of course. Voldemort was not truly gone. Darkness had only retreated, wounded and bodiless, waiting for paths back into the world. Aberforth did not know that fully then, but some part of him suspected it. Evil rooted in fear rarely dies all at once. It hides, it waits, it finds new mouths to speak old hatreds. And men like Aberforth, who had spent their lives listening from shadowed rooms, knew better than most that silence was not always peace. Sometimes it was only the world holding its breath again. For many years after the first fall of Lord Voldemort, Aberforth Dumbledore returned to the life he understood best. He kept the Hog's Head open. He served drinks with the same rough impatience. He fed his goats before most of Hogsmeade had stirred awake. He listened to the village change around him while pretending not to care about any of it. Above him, Hogwarts continued sending students into the village on bright weekends, their cloaks fluttering in cold wind, their voices filling the streets with laughter, gossip, and small complaints that belonged to childhood. They bought sweets from honeydukes. They crowded into warmer inns. They dared one another to approach the Hog's Head and then hesitated outside its dirty windows. Aberforth watched them come and go across the years. Some seemed brave, some foolish, some lonely, some already shaped by family names heavier than they knew. And then, eventually, Harry Potter came. At first, Harry was only a name carried through the world, like an old echo, the boy who lived, the child who had survived where no one else could, the reason Voldemort vanished. People spoke of him as though infancy itself had contained some hidden courage, as though a baby had made a choice no grown wizard could explain. Aberforth disliked that sort of talk. Children should not become symbols before they were old enough to understand suffering. He had seen what happened when adults placed meanings upon young lives and expected those lives to carry them. For years, Harry remained distant from Aberforth's world, living somewhere beyond magical society while legends grew around him. But the name never disappeared. It surfaced in newspapers, in conversations at the bar, in arguments among customers who believed too strongly in prophecy, fate, or fame. Aberforth said little. He wondered sometimes what Albus knew, because Albus always knew more than he said. When Harry finally entered Hogwarts, the old machinery of history began moving again. Not loudly at first, not in ways most people recognized. But Aberforth had spent too long listening from shadows to miss the shift. Whispers returned. The boy was at school now. Albus watched him closely. Strange things happened around him. Danger seemed to find him with unnerving regularity. Aberforth did not know every detail in those early years, but fragments reached the Hog's Head, as fragments always did. A troll in the castle. The Chamber of Secrets reopened. Dementors near school grounds. A tournament that should never have involved a boy so young. Cedric Diggory dead. Voldemort returned. The last rumor did not surprise Aberforth as much as it surprised others. He had never trusted the silence after the First War. When the wizarding world began denying Harry's warning, Aberforth recognized cowardice immediately. It sounded the same in every age. Polished officials explaining that truth was inconvenient. Newspapers reshaping fear into mockery. Comfortable people choosing disbelief because belief would require action. Harry Potter, still only a boy, became the center of that denial. Aberforth watched from a distance with growing unease. Not affection, exactly. He did not know the boy, but there was something bitterly familiar in seeing a young person trapped inside plans and dangers built by adults. Albus, of course, stood somewhere behind it all. That knowledge made Aberforth more suspicious, not less. He had seen his brother's compassion. He had also seen his brother's talent for secrecy. Albus could love someone and still place them on a path paved with sacrifice if he believed the final destination mattered enough. Aberforth knew that better than anyone. Then came the year Dolores Umbridge entered Hogwarts. Even before students began filtering into Hogsmeade with anxious faces and careful whispers, Aberforth sensed something wrong inside the castle. The mood of the village changed. Professors visited less openly. Students glanced over their shoulders more often. Ministry influence moved through the school like damp cold beneath a door. The Hog's Head saw more nervous young faces than usual that year. Most still preferred the Three Broomsticks, with its warmth and safer reputation. But fear has a way of driving people toward rougher rooms where official eyes are less welcome. One afternoon, a group of students gathered inside the Hog's Head under the pretense of privacy. Aberforth recognized Harry Potter among them immediately. The boy looked smaller than his legend and more tired than a child should. Beside him were Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley, both watchful in different ways. Around them clustered other students, uncertain and determined, carrying the restless energy of young people who know something is wrong but have not yet learned the full cost of resisting it. Aberforth served them and listened. He did not need to lean close. People forget how sound travels in old rooms, especially when floorboards are warped, walls thin, and the barman has spent decades hearing secrets beneath worse noise. They spoke of learning defensive magic, of forming a group, of Harry teaching them what the ministry refused to allow them to learn. Aberforth understood the danger immediately. He also understood the necessity. The students were frightened, but not foolish. They had realized something many adults still avoided saying aloud. The world was becoming dangerous again, and the official structures meant to protect them had become obstacles instead. That meeting would become the beginning of Dumbledore's army. The name itself might have amused him if the circumstances had been less grim. Albus's name, carried by children gathering in secret against ministry interference. Aberforth wondered if his brother knew. He suspected, yes. With Albus, ignorance was rarely safe to assume. Still, Aberforth did not stop them. He did not encourage them either. Encouragement was not his way. He watched. He remembered. He made sure no customer interfered too closely. And when the group eventually left, he cleaned their tables slowly, noticing the mixture of nervousness and purpose they had left behind, like warmth in a cold room. Young people choosing danger because adults had failed them. There was nothing new in that. Only the names changed. As Voldemort's return became impossible to deny, the wizarding world slid again toward open fear. Death Eaters moved more boldly. Families chose sides or pretended not to. The ministry stumbled beneath infiltration and panic. Hogwarts, once the safest place in Britain, became less certain each year. Aberforth's role remained hidden because hidden roles suited him best. He was not part of Harry's inner circle. He did not sit beside fires explaining plans. He did not offer guidance wrapped in riddles. He remained in Hogsmeade, in the inn no one respectable fully trusted, watching roads, doors, faces, and rumors. Then Mundungus Fletcher came through his life carrying broken pieces of someone else's grief. Mundungus was exactly the sort of man Aberforth understood and disliked in equal measure. Shifty, opportunistic, dishonest, and yet occasionally useful in the way such people often were. He moved through the margins of the wizarding world, collecting things that did not entirely belong to him, and selling them to people who asked few questions. Among the objects he offered was a two-way mirror, or part of one. Sirius Black's mirror, though Aberforth did not know every piece of its history immediately. The object carried old magic, intimate magic, the kind meant not for power, but connection. A paired mirror through which one person might look and reach another across distance. Aberforth bought it. Perhaps he told himself it might be useful. Perhaps he recognized something important in it without fully understanding why. Perhaps old instinct stirred, the same instinct that had once kept him awake beside Ariana's bed, listening for danger before it erupted. Whatever the reason, the mirror became one more silent thread connecting him to the unfolding story around Harry Potter. Through it, Aberforth saw glimpses, not everything. Never enough to understand all of Albus's plans, but enough. He saw Harry at times of distress. He saw danger gathering around him in fragments. He saw the boy moving deeper into a war older people had prepared around him long before he understood its shape. And after Albus died, the mirror mattered more. Albus's death struck the wizarding world like a bell tolling over water, the sound traveling outward until even those who claimed not to care felt the vibration. Aberforth heard about it quickly. The great Albus Dumbledore, dead on the astronomy tower, killed by Severus Snape, Hogwarts shaken, the final protection gone, or so people whispered. For Aberforth, the news did not arrive as legend. It arrived as the death of his brother. Whatever bitterness lay between them, whatever anger remained from Ariana's grave and decades of secrets, Albus had still been the last person alive who remembered their childhood as he did. The last person who remembered mold on the wold before shame, their father before Azkaban, their mother before exhaustion, Ariana before fear. With Albus gone, those memories belonged to Aberforth alone. Grief came, though he did not welcome it. Anger came with it, naturally. Albus had died as he had lived in later years, surrounded by plans Aberforth only half understood. Secrets layered over secrets, people moving where he had placed them. Harry Potter left with burdens no child should have carried. Aberforth did not weep publicly. He kept the inn open. He fed the goats. He snapped at customers more harshly than usual, until even regulars avoided speaking Albus's name within earshot. But at night, when Hogsmeade grew quiet beneath curfew and fear, he looked sometimes toward the castle and felt the old wound open again, in a new place. Then the world grew darker still. Voldemort took control in all but name. The Ministry fell. Hogwarts changed under new leadership. Snape became headmaster, and the Carrows entered the school like cruelty, given permission to teach. Students suffered. Aberforth heard enough to know it clearly. The castle above Hogsmeade no longer shone with the same safety it once had. Its windows still glowed at night, but the light seemed colder. Children came into the village thinner, quieter, more guarded. Some carried bruises hidden beneath sleeves. Some avoided speaking at all. The old anger in Aberforth returned with purpose. Children should not pay for adult wars. He began helping where he could, though he did so in ways that left little trace. Students fleeing punishment found paths through Hogsmeade. Messages moved quietly. The Hog's Head became more important again, precisely because darkness overlooked rough places until too late. Behind its dirty windows and unpleasant reputation, small acts of resistance continued. Then one night, through the mirror, Aberforth saw Harry in terrible danger. Not clearly at first, only fragments. A face, a room, fear and desperation pressing through the glass like cold breath. Harry and his friends were trapped in Malfoy Manor, surrounded by enemies, far from safety. Aberforth acted. There was no speech, no hesitation dressed as strategy, no meeting to discuss acceptable risk. He sent Dobby, a house elf, small and brave beyond measure, able to reach places many wizards could not. Dobby went because help was needed, and because sometimes rescue depends not on power, but on the willingness to move immediately when someone calls from darkness. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Dean, Ollivander, and Griphook survived because of that intervention. Dobby died because of it too. Aberforth knew enough afterward to understand the cost. That knowledge sat heavily with him. He had never sentimentalized war. Every rescue risked someone. Every choice carried unseen damage. But Dobby's death belonged to the long list of sacrifices surrounding Harry Potter, and Aberforth grew increasingly furious with the shape of that list. How many had Albus expected? How many had he accepted? How much had he told the boy? How much had he hidden? These questions burned quietly as Voldemort's war moved toward its final stage. Aberforth's skepticism toward Albus hardened after death, rather than softened. The living often become gentler toward the dead because the dead can no longer argue. Aberforth did not grant his brother that ease. If anything, Albus's absence made the secrets more infuriating. Harry believed in him still. That much was clear. Aberforth saw it even before speaking with him properly. The boy carried Albus's mission like a lantern cupped desperately against stormwind. He did not know everything, but he continued forward because Albus had asked it of him, directly or indirectly. That kind of faith frightened Aberforth. Faith in Albus Dumbledore had always frightened him, because he knew how persuasive his brother could be, how gentle, how wise, how careful, how capable of making a dangerous path feel necessary. And perhaps it was necessary. That was the worst part. Aberforth did not know. He only knew that Harry was still young, hunted, exhausted, and moving towards something that looked very much like death. When Harry finally returned to Hogsmeade with Ron and Hermione, The village lay under curfew and surveillance. Death Eaters watched the streets. Dementors drifted near. The air itself seemed sharpened by fear. The trio triggered alarms almost immediately. Aberforth acted again. He pulled them into the Hog's Head before death could close around them completely. Inside the dim room, away from watchers outside, the young faces before him looked worn far beyond their years. Harry was no longer the boy from the secret meeting years earlier. War had carved him thinner. Loss had settled behind his eyes. Ron and Hermione stood beside him with the wary exhaustion of people who had already survived too much together to explain easily. Aberforth saw all of it, and beneath his irritation, he felt something like pity. Not soft pity, not gentle, but recognition. "You're fools," he told them in one form or another, because that was the language he knew best, but he sheltered them anyway. There in the Hog's Head, with danger pressing outside and Ariana's portrait hanging quietly nearby, the hidden lines of Aberforth's life crossed fully with Harry Potter's. The boy asked for help entering Hogwarts. Aberforth resisted at first, not because he feared danger for himself, because he thought Harry should leave. He told him the truth as he saw it, that Albus had used people, that his brother kept secrets, that chasing whatever mission had been left behind might lead only to death. He spoke harshly because gentleness would not have served. Harry needed to hear the other side of Albus Dumbledore, the side polished histories omitted. Aberforth gave him that. He told him about Ariana, about Albus and Grindelwald, about ambition and neglect and a girl caught between them. Not every detail, perhaps, not every feeling, but enough to crack the marble statue Harry carried in his mind and reveal the flawed man beneath. And still, Harry chose to go on. That mattered. Aberforth watched him carefully during that conversation. He expected denial, perhaps anger, perhaps blind loyalty. What he saw instead was pain, confusion, and decision. Harry did not worship Albus quite the way others did. He loved him, perhaps, trusted him, doubted him, and continued anyway. There was a difference. Aberforth recognized it reluctantly. Harry Potter was not simply Albus's pawn. Whatever secrets had shaped his path, the boy standing in the Hog's Head chose with his own tired heart. So Aberforth helped him. Behind the portrait of Ariana lay the passage to Hogwarts. A hidden way opened through the Room of Requirement. Ariana's painted figure, quiet and solemn, moved within her frame toward help. For Aberforth, that portrait was more than concealment. It was memory given form. Ariana still between worlds, still silently opening doors for frightened children caught inside other people's wars. Neville Longbottom appeared through the passage, battered but alive, carrying the fierce endurance of students who had refused to surrender under cruelty. More students followed in time. The Hog's Head, rough and smoky and long dismissed by respectable society, became a threshold into resistance. Aberforth had never sought such symbolism, but life gave it to him anyway. The inn that had sheltered whispers now sheltered the return of hope to Hogwarts. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione passed through toward the castle, Aberforth remained behind for a moment in the dimness of his own bar. Outside, danger still waited. Inside, the portrait of Ariana rested quietly upon the wall. He had spent most of his life trying not to be drawn into grand stories. Yet here he was, again, standing at the edge of one. This time, however, the difference mattered. He was not following a dream of domination, not serving a greater good that required forgetting individual lives, not sacrificing someone else from a distance. He was opening a door, that was all. A small act, a practical act, a necessary act, and as Aberforth Dumbledore had learned long ago, small necessary acts were often the only kind worth trusting. The night Harry Potter returned to Hogsmeade, the village felt like a place holding its breath. Curfew had emptied most streets. Windows remained dark behind tightly drawn curtains. Even the snow along rooftops seemed quieter beneath the weight of fear pressing over Britain. Somewhere beyond the village, Voldemort's forces moved with growing confidence, and everyone understood that the final shape of the war was approaching, though few knew exactly how close it truly was. Inside the Hog's Head, the fire burned low, while shadows stretched across old wooden beams darkened by decades of smoke. Aberforth Dumbledore stood behind the bar, watching Harry Potter carefully. The boy looked exhausted. Not ordinary exhaustion, not the weariness solved by sleep or warmth, but the deeper kind born from carrying responsibility too heavy for one life. Dirt streaked his face. His clothes bore signs of travel and danger. Beside him stood Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, both equally worn by months of hiding, fear, and constant movement. For a long moment, Aberforth said nothing. He simply studied Harry. The shape of the face reminded him painfully of James Potter sometimes. The eyes, however, belonged entirely to Lily. And somewhere beneath both, hidden under fear and stubbornness, lived traces of Albus as well. Not in appearance, in determination. That troubled him. Outside, wind pressed softly against the inn windows, while distant noises echoed faintly through the village streets. Harry explained quickly why they had come. They needed access to Hogwarts. Aberforth reacted immediately. "No," he said flatly. Harry blinked in surprise. "No? You heard me." The boy stepped forward, frustration already rising. "We have to get inside. And you think because you have to, that means you should? We don't have time for this." Aberforth laughed once without humor. That's what fools always say before getting themselves killed. Ron shifted uncomfortably nearby, while Hermione watched silently, understanding perhaps more quickly than Harry that something deeper moved beneath the conversation. Aberforth looked directly at Harry again. "You know what your problem is?" Harry opened his mouth sharply. "You think you're the first person who ever believed some great mission mattered more than ordinary lives." The room fell quiet. Behind them, Ariana's portrait watched silently from the wall. Harry's expression hardened. "This isn't about glory." "No," Aberforth replied. "That's what makes it dangerous." For a moment, Harry resembled Albus so strongly that Aberforth almost hated him for it. Not because the resemblance was exact, because it carried the same terrible willingness to keep walking towards sacrifice after understanding the cost. Aberforth moved slowly around the bar. "You trusted my brother," he said quietly. Harry nodded. "Yes. And how much did he actually tell you?" Harry hesitated. That hesitation told Aberforth enough already, so he began speaking. Not as the world knew Albus Dumbledore, not as the great headmaster, not as the brilliant defender against darkness, as a brother, as a young man, as someone flawed enough to help destroy his own family while believing himself noble. The words came harshly at first. They always did with Aberforth. He spoke about Grindelwald, about ambition, about the dreams Albus once shared concerning wizard dominance and power, used for what they called the greater good. Harry looked stunned. Hermione looked deeply unsettled. Ron mostly looked confused and worried at once. Aberforth continued anyway. "He never told you?" he asked. "Never mentioned how close he came to becoming the sort of wizard people later praised him for defeating?" Harry spoke quietly. "He told me he made mistakes. Mistakes. Aberforth almost spat the word. Ariana died because of those mistakes. Silence settled heavily through the room. The fire crackled softly nearby, while snow drifted against the windows outside. For the first time in years, Aberforth spoke openly about that terrible summer. Not every detail, perhaps. Some grief remained too private even now, but enough. Enough for Harry to understand that Albus Dumbledore had once stood dangerously close to becoming someone else entirely. He wanted freedom, Aberforth said quietly. Wanted greatness. Wanted escape from responsibility. And he met someone who told him all those things were the same. Harry listened without interrupting. That mattered. Most people, upon hearing such things about Albus Dumbledore, rushed immediately toward defense or disbelief. Harry did neither. Pain crossed his face, certainly. Confusion too. But he listened. That alone softened something inside Aberforth slightly. He loved Ariana, Harry said after a long silence. Aberforth looked toward the portrait on the wall. Yes, he admitted softly. He did. The words carried exhaustion more than anger now, because that had always been the tragedy. Albus had truly loved his family. He had simply also loved ideas powerful enough to eclipse them. Harry stepped closer to the portrait. She's the one in the passage? Aberforth nodded once. Ariana always wanted to help frightened people. Again, silence filled the room. Then Harry said something unexpected. He wasn't perfect. No, Aberforth replied, but he was trying. Those words landed strangely. Trying. Such a simple word for the burden Albus had carried across decades. Trying to defeat darkness. Trying to atone. Trying to protect others from becoming what Grindelwald had once almost persuaded him to be. Trying perhaps to make Ariana's death mean something beyond meaningless loss. Aberforth felt old anger shifting uncomfortably beneath those thoughts. Not disappearing. Never disappearing completely, but changing shape, because Harry did not worship Albus blindly after all. The boy saw the flaws, and still continued forward. That mattered more than Aberforth expected. You're still going into the castle, he said quietly. Yes, even now. Yes. Aberforth stared at him for a long moment, then finally exhaled. Stubborn idiot. Harry almost smiled despite everything. The portrait of Ariana opened the passage soon afterward. Neville Longbottom emerged from the hidden tunnel, looking far older than the boy Aberforth vaguely remembered from earlier Hogwarts years. Bruises marked his face. His clothes carried ash and dirt from recent conflict. Yet his eyes burned with fierce determination. Harry, Neville breathed. Relief passed visibly through the room. Behind Neville stretched the hidden path into Hogwarts itself, through the Room of Requirement, where resistance had continued beneath the Carrow's cruelty and Snape's cold authority. Aberforth watched students begin appearing gradually through the passage. Tired faces, hungry faces, young faces sharpened by fear and endurance. They greeted Harry with growing excitement, hope spreading rapidly through them as word traveled that he had returned. Hope. Aberforth distrusted hope sometimes. It made people reckless, but he also understood its power, especially among the young. Soon enough, movement consumed the hidden chamber behind the portrait. Messages passed, plans formed. Defenders gathered themselves for what everyone now sensed was coming. War had reached Hogwarts at last. Aberforth remained inside the Hog's Head for a time, while the castle above prepared itself. He stood behind the bar, listening to distant sounds filtering faintly through the hidden passage. Voices, footsteps, the restless movement of people preparing for battle. And beneath it all, memory. Another summer, another house, another group of frightened young people believing they understood the future well enough to gamble lives upon it. The parallels disturbed him deeply. Eventually, however, stillness became impossible. The battle began. Even from Hogsmeade, the signs appeared unmistakably. Magical explosions flashed against the night sky above Hogwarts. Distant crashes rolled across the hills. The castle glowed with defensive enchantments, while dark figures moved against its walls. People screamed in the village streets. Families fled indoors. Fear spread like winter wind through every corner of Hogsmeade. Aberforth could have stayed behind the bar. Part of him wanted to. He was old by then, tired, long removed from dreams of heroism. The world already possessed enough young people eager to die for causes. But Hogwarts stood above the village. Children remained inside. And Harry Potter, carrying all of Albus's impossible plans upon his shoulders, had walked into darkness anyway. Aberforth reached for his wand. The castle grounds had become chaos by the time he arrived. Spells tore through the night in violent streaks of red and green. Giants moved among shattered walls. Acromantulas poured from the forest. Defenders fought desperately through smoke and falling stone, while screams echoed beneath collapsing towers. Hogwarts itself seemed alive with resistance. Students fought beside professors. Parents arrived to defend children. Members of the Order battled across corridors and courtyards lit by magical fire. Aberforth moved through it all with brutal practicality. He did not duel theatrically. He did not shout speeches. He fought like someone protecting ground already soaked in too much grief to surrender again. Death Eaters learned quickly that the rough barman from the Hog's Head possessed far more magical skill than rumors suggested. Aberforth's magic carried none of Albus's elegance, but it carried force and certainty, sharpened by decades of hard experience. Several attackers fell backward beneath curses powerful enough to crack stone walls. Others fled entirely after recognizing the fury behind his spells. Somewhere amidst the chaos, Aberforth realized something strange. For most of his life, he had defined himself partly through resistance to Albus. Not hatred exactly, but opposition. Refusal to be dazzled. Refusal to follow brilliance blindly. Yet now he fought for the same thing his brother had spent decades defending. Not greatness, not power. People, children, the frightened and vulnerable. Perhaps that had always been the truest part of Albus as well, beneath all the secrets and ambition. The realization came unwillingly, but it came. Hours blurred together during the battle. Aberforth saw teachers dueling through shattered corridors, saw students refusing retreat despite terror, saw giants crashing through defenses while spells exploded around them in sheets of colored light. And somewhere within the castle, Harry moved steadily toward Voldemort himself. Toward death, Aberforth suspected. Because now, finally, he understood the shape of Albus's final plan. The old anger returned sharply then. Not because Albus had been wrong, perhaps. Because he had once again placed unbearable burden upon someone young. The same pattern repeating across generations. Only this time, Harry walked knowingly toward it. That difference mattered. As dawn approached, exhaustion settled over everyone remaining alive. The castle smoldered. Bodies lay beneath ruined stone. Survivors moved like ghosts through smoke and broken glass. Then came silence. A terrible silence. Word spread rapidly that Harry Potter was dead. Aberforth felt the air leave the castle almost physically. Students wept openly. Defenders lowered wands in despair. Voldemort's voice rolled triumphantly across the grounds, while Death Eaters gathered themselves for final victory. For one terrible moment, it truly seemed finished. Aberforth stood among ruined walls, staring toward Harry's body in the distance, and thought suddenly of Ariana, of all the young lives crushed beneath older wars. Perhaps that was why his next emotion surprised him. Not despair, rage, cold and steady. Because if Harry Potter had truly died after carrying all this weight alone, then the world had repeated the same cruelty yet again. But Harry was not dead, and when he rose, everything changed. The final battle erupted with desperate fury. Defenders surged forward once more. Voldemort's certainty cracked visibly. Spells crossed the Great Hall in blinding flashes, while survivors fought with the terrifying strength born from one last chance. Aberforth fought beside them, not as Albus Dumbledore's lesser brother, not as the barman of the Hog's Head, as a man who had spent his life protecting frightened people in whatever rough, imperfect ways he could manage. Then Voldemort fell. The moment itself happened almost quietly after so much chaos. One spell, one final collapse, then silence spreading outward through the ruined hall as realization slowly reached everyone present. The war was over, this time truly over. Around him, people cried openly. Some laughed from sheer disbelief. Others simply collapsed where they stood, too exhausted to understand survival yet. Aberforth remained still. He looked around the shattered hall, children alive who should not have needed to fight, teachers wounded, families embracing, bodies covered beneath cloaks nearby. Victory never looked clean in reality. It looked like survival standing shakily beside grief. As dawn finally rose over Hogwarts, pale light spread across broken towers and smoke-darkened stone. The castle remained standing, barely. Aberforth walked slowly through the aftermath, feeling older than ever before. Harry Potter survived. Voldemort was gone. Albus's long war had ended. And somewhere behind everything, behind battles and prophecies and legends, one truth remained quietly waiting. The frightened children of Godric's Hollow had spent their entire lives living in the shadow of one terrible summer. One became the most feared dark wizard in Europe. One became the greatest defender against darkness, and one kept opening doors for people trying to survive what greatness left behind. After the battle ended, Aberforth Dumbledore returned to the Hog's Head. There was no grand procession for him, no crowd waiting in Hogsmeade to cheer his name. No one lifted him onto shoulders or asked for speeches about courage. The wizarding world had other names to remember first, and rightly so. Harry Potter, the boy who had walked into death and returned, the friends who stood beside him, the teachers who defended the school, the families who came when the castle called. Aberforth did not mind being overlooked. He had spent most of his life there. The walk back from Hogwarts felt longer than it had before. Dawn had already softened the sky, spreading pale gold over rooftops and broken snow. Smoke still drifted from the castle behind him. Some windows were shattered, some towers damaged. Yet Hogwarts remained standing against the morning, wounded but unfallen. Aberforth paused once on the road and looked back. For decades, the castle had stood above his life like a second moon. Albus's world, students' world, a place of learning, danger, secrets, and impossible loyalties. Now it looked tired, almost human. He continued down into Hogsmeade without another word. The village bore its own marks from the night. Doors hung open where people had fled or gathered news. Footprints crossed snow in frantic patterns. A few windows were broken. Smoke drifted from chimneys that had burned all night, while frightened families waited for the outcome of a war that seemed to have lasted far longer than any single lifetime. The sign of the Hog's Head creaked gently above the door. Aberforth unlocked the inn and stepped inside. The room smelled exactly as it always had. Smoke, old wood, spilled drink, damp wool, and the faint animal scent he had long stopped noticing. Tables stood where he had left them before everything changed. A glass remained overturned near the bar. Ash had settled in the fireplace. For a moment, the ordinary ugliness of the place nearly undid him. Not because it was beautiful, because it had survived. He crossed the room slowly and set his wand on the counter. His hands ached. His shoulders felt stiff beneath his robes. Somewhere beneath the exhaustion, old injuries from the battle announced themselves one by one. Outside, a goat bleated impatiently. Aberforth closed his eyes. Then, after everything, he laughed once. Not loudly, not happily exactly, but with the strange disbelief of someone who had watched a dark lord fall, walked through a ruined school, and returned home to be scolded by livestock for late breakfast. He fed the goats before cleaning the bar. That seemed proper. The days after the battle passed in a haze of mourning and repair. Hogsmeade filled with movement. Survivors came and went between the village and the castle. Families searched for the living and grieved the dead. Owls crossed the sky constantly, carrying news to places still trembling from years of fear. The wizarding world began speaking almost immediately of rebuilding. It needed to. People require such words after disaster. Rebuilding, healing, justice, peace. They give shape to days that otherwise feel impossible to enter. Aberforth trusted actions more than words, so he repaired broken chairs, replaced damaged bottles, fixed a cracked window, cleared soot from the fireplace, threw out 2 men who tried to turn the battle into drunken boasting before the dead had even been buried. The Hog's Head reopened quietly. At first, few people came, then more. Some entered because other inns were too crowded with mourners. Some came because they wanted somewhere dim and quiet, where nobody expected them to speak beautifully about grief. A few came because they had passed through the Hog's Head before the battle and understood, in ways they could not easily explain, that the rough old barman had helped more than he would ever admit. Aberforth served them all. He did not ask for stories, but he listened when they came. Students spoke in low voices about friends who had fallen. Parents sat motionless over untouched drinks. Former members of Dumbledore's army passed through occasionally, older now despite being young, marked by survival in ways no school should have given them. Neville Longbottom came once, bruises still fading from his face, carrying himself with the quiet steadiness of someone who had discovered courage not as a moment, but as a habit. He thanked Aberforth. Aberforth grunted and told him his drink was getting warm. Neville smiled anyway. Harry Potter came too, though not immediately. When he finally entered the Hog's Head again, the room was nearly empty. He looked different in daylight after the war, still tired, still too thin, but something terrible had loosened from around him, not disappeared entirely. Nothing like that disappears quickly, but loosened. Aberforth looked at him across the bar. Alive then? Harry nodded. Seems so. Try not to make a habit of nearly changing that. For the first time, Harry smiled properly. It was brief but real. They did not speak long. There was too much and not enough to say. Harry thanked him for helping them enter Hogwarts. Thanked him for sending Dobby. Thanked him, perhaps, for telling the truth about Albus, when truth was painful and badly needed. Aberforth accepted none of it gracefully, but he did not reject it either. Before Harry left, he glanced toward Ariana's portrait. "She helped us," he said quietly. Aberforth followed his gaze. "Yes." Harry hesitated. I think your brother would have wanted her remembered. Aberforth's expression hardened by instinct, then softened despite himself. My brother wanted many things. Harry accepted the answer without arguing. That Aberforth appreciated. After he left, Aberforth stood for a long time staring at the portrait. Ariana remained painted in stillness, gentle and distant, her face forever young in a way that memory both preserved and wounded. For most of his life, grief had kept her fixed in the room where she died. But after the battle, something changed. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not peace. Something quieter. A recognition that Ariana's story had not ended only in that terrible flash of light. Her portrait had opened the way for children resisting cruelty. Her memory had guarded a passage. Her presence, in some small way, had helped bring Harry Potter back into Hogwarts on the night Voldemort fell. Aberforth did not turn that into comfort too quickly. He distrusted easy comfort, but he allowed the thought to remain. Albus was buried elsewhere, honored as one of the greatest wizards who ever lived. People continued speaking of him in reverent tones, perhaps even more after death than before. Books would be written, portraits would remember him, students would study his achievements. His mistakes would be softened, debated, misunderstood, defended, and condemned by people who had never seen him young and afraid in Godric's Hollow. Aberforth knew all of this would happen. He could not stop history from polishing what it wished to preserve, nor did he entirely want to. Albus had earned much of the honor given to him. That truth had become easier to admit after the final battle, though not painless. His brother had stood against two dark lords across one long life. He had carried guilt like a hidden chain, and still tried, again and again, to protect a world that never knew the full shape of his remorse. But Aberforth also knew the other truth. Albus had been a brother before he became a legend. A brilliant, flawed, loving, secretive, dangerous, wounded brother. And perhaps Aberforth's life had been shaped by refusing to let the legend erase the man. In the months after the war, visitors occasionally came seeking stories. Some wanted to ask about Harry, some about the battle, some about Albus. A few brave or foolish souls wanted to ask about Ariana, after rumors spread from those who had heard fragments during the final night. Aberforth turned most of them away. Not every story belongs to the public simply because history is curious. Still, he found himself less angry than before when Albus's name arose. Irritated, certainly. Impatient, often, but not always angry. Sometimes, late at night, he remembered his brother as a child again, before Grindelwald, before the Hallows, before Ariana's death. Albus sitting beside a stream at Mold on the Wold, arguing about magic while Aberforth tried to catch fish. Albus making lights dance above Ariana's cradle. Albus laughing before greatness became a burden. Those memories had once hurt too much to touch. Now they returned more gently. Aberforth remained at the Hog's Head because there was nowhere else he wished to be. The inn still suited him. Its rough walls, smoky corners, and suspicious customers asked nothing false from him. He kept his goats. He kept his temper. He kept listening. But the world outside slowly changed. Students returned to Hogwarts, not all at once and not unchanged. The castle repaired itself in stone and spell, though the deeper wounds took longer. Hogsmeade regained laughter by degrees. Shop windows brightened. Footsteps became less hurried. The first winter after the war settled over the village with a gentleness that felt almost uncertain, as though peace itself needed practice returning. Aberforth watched it all from behind the bar. Younger students eventually began daring one another to enter the Hog's Head again. just as they always had. They whispered about the barman, about goats, about whether he had truly fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, about whether he was really related to Albus Dumbledore. Aberforth glared at them until they ordered something or left. Life resumed in small, stubborn ways. That he trusted. Not triumph, not speeches. Small, stubborn life. A repaired roof. A warm fire. A frightened child no longer frightened. A village window lit after dark. A goat refusing to stay where it was put. A portrait watching quietly over a hidden passage no longer needed. Aberforth had survived long enough to become the last Dumbledore. That fact settled over him strangely. Percival gone, Kendra gone, Ariana gone, Albus gone. Only Aberforth remained, carrying the family not in glory, but in memory. He held the parts no textbook could hold, the sound of his father's laugh before Azkaban, his mother's hands trembling after too many sleepless nights, Ariana's voice asking for something pretty, Albus's silence after being struck at the funeral. History would remember the Dumbledores unevenly. It always had. But Aberforth remembered them whole. And perhaps that was enough. Not enough to undo the past. Nothing could do that. Not enough to erase bitterness entirely. He would carry some bitterness to his grave, and he knew it. But enough to keep the truth alive in one quiet, stubborn heart. Years from then, people might still pass through Hogsmeade and see only an old inn with dirty windows and a bad reputation. They might see a gruff barman who looked as though he had never cared for anything beyond ale, goats, and being left alone. They would be wrong, of course. Aberforth Dumbledore had cared too deeply. That had always been the source of his anger. He cared for Ariana when care meant exhaustion. He cared for Albus when love was tangled with blame. He cared for frightened students while pretending annoyance. He cared for a world he distrusted enough to fight for it anyway. His life had not been grand in the way people measure grandeur, but it had endured. And sometimes endurance is its own quiet form of magic. And so, as the years passed quietly over the hills surrounding Hogsmeade, Aberforth Dumbledore remained where he had always seemed most comfortable, behind the worn counter of the Hogshead, beneath crooked beams darkened by smoke and time, listening more than speaking, watching more than most people realized. History remembered his brother as one of the greatest wizards who ever lived. Students would speak the name Albus Dumbledore with admiration for generations to come. Songs would be written. Portraits would smile wisely from castle walls. The world would remember brilliance. But Aberforth remembered the human being beneath the legend. A brother who laughed beside streams as a child. A young man who dreamed too greatly. A grieving soul who spent the rest of his life trying to outrun one terrible summer in Godric's Hollow. And perhaps that is why Aberforth's story matters so deeply, because not every important life becomes famous. Some lives are spent quietly holding doors open for frightened people, while history looks elsewhere. Some acts of love happen in rough inns, hidden passages, and silent moments no book ever records. Now, the fire burns low. The village sleeps peacefully beneath the night sky. And somewhere beyond the castle lights, the old Hogshead still waits in silence, keeping its memories close.